Right, we have returned for the third episode of Shut Up and Scale. Obviously, as usual, we will be doing some topical things. Sometimes we'll just force it to be topical. We'll talk about whatever point in history we like. But now, it doesn't have to be one of those tangents where the Zoomer person's like, why are they talking about 2017 on like Somebody Insight or something? Now, the whole show's that. We can just do whatever we want, boys. We can go wherever we like in all of history and time. It's like Doctor Who, but for League of Legends esports or something. Obviously, you guys make up your own fanfic. Would Nymaera be Billy Piper? I don't know. You decide who to. I imagine Peter's more the Doctor. I don't know who I am. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Maybe I can be the master, the villain of this piece who keeps the plot going. Who knows?
We were actually really spoiled with like the early 2000s Doctor Who stuff. That was actually legit for a while until they dumbed it down. Everything Blink got too scary, and then we're like, we forgot that we have to do this for kids. I'm like, Doctor Who was always a horror show. It was great, very creative, but
the reboot definitely was good. I'll say that. I agree with you. It definitely withered on the vine, but it was legit when it first got going again. Okay. Speaking of getting going again, we're just going to start with one, a super spicy topic, and two, as I just said, this can just go anywhere. So, Nymaera, this is your idea for a topic. So what are you bringing to the table for this one?
Well, you know, I like to make sure that we've got actual pitch battles happening in the comments. I like to fear for my own personal safety from topics. So for the topic this week is, because people get so stuck on who is the best player of all time, both in each role and of overall, I thought it'd be more interesting for our first topic this week to be who is the second best player of all time in each role and overall. So we will have to, of course, define our best in there too, to make sure we understand who the second is there too, but who is the best, not greatest, best player of their role, and more importantly, who is the second best player of each role and overall of all time. So I guess we should dive into, I think probably the way to go about this is talk about role by role and go overall.
Yeah.
We're probably going to have a lot of overlap. We might have some cases where we disagree on first or second or a whole bunch of the shortlist. We'll go over a load of the different potentials in there too. And gosh, I'm trying to think which role do you guys think is the most interesting? Because I think there are two which I think are pretty easy, and then I think that there are three which are a little bit more out there. Yeah, I think there are two which are a bit more easy, and then I think there are three which I
personally think the hardest one actually is ADC. I think ADC has so many viable candidates who are all amazing players, and a lot of them even have fairly similar accomplishments. I think that one's a pretty hard one for me.
So let's start with ADC then. So I have a short list. I'll have a short list first, and I'm trying to think if I should mention some names, because again, we're all going to mention these names anyway. I think the short list is Deft, Ruler, Viper, Uzi. I think those ones are inarguable. And then after that, you might throw another couple of names in. But I think those four names are inarguable in some order. Choosing first and second out of them, that's hell, though. I chose my first as Deft. I think he's my first because I really valued his longevity and his versatility. And also, I think his Worlds win in 22 is probably, that was very much off the back of him with very unexpected circumstances where he peaked very, very hard there. And also, he's a guy that won the very first MSI at 2015. He's a multi-region winner as well. So he's my first place in there. And then second place, I guess I'll give first and second because that's the nature of the question here. Then second, I have gone for Ruler, but I'm very close on Viper there too. Because I think Ruler peaked harder, but I think Viper was more versatile and he's been better. I think in his recent years, I think he's done more with less. So that's where I'd start with that. Any discussion on those two?
So I've got a question about criteria. So when you say what's the best, how would you weight the different criteria, in terms of longevity, in terms of peak? Because I think this will impact a little bit. I think this is where the difference in ours will come. But I'm curious to hear yours first.
Yeah, so I think, there's a sliding scale of all of these. It's not all or nothing. I think that peak is very important. I think longevity is very important. Otherwise, there are a couple of people for other roles where I think that they peaked for very, very hard for one season and then never really did that much against. And then there are some people who were only there for a couple of years and then didn't quite keep it beyond that point. I have some interesting thoughts on Kiin and Smeb for that instance, right? Where they had some very hard, spiky years, and then perhaps the longevity wasn't quite there in some other points. Particularly on AD carry, though, because it's such a comparable skill set, there's a lot of things we can kind of go one-to-one with in terms of, well, okay, how did you in a hyper carry meta, in a utility meta? In the odd case of Viper as well, how did they do in the 2018, the bruiser meta bot lane on the mage bot lane as well? Does that factor into it? That, for instance, tamps down a lot of the more traditional AD carries at that point. They're all a sliding scale. I can't give you exact percentages on that because we're only judging a pool of 4 people. I can't just say this factors like for the whole cohort more. It's very case by case. For me, Deft was there. He was best AD carry in the world probably 2014 and arguably 2015 as well. And then he kind of repicked up that title at various years since that point in very different metas over a huge career for him. So for me, that just beats out someone like Ruler who, while was around very, very high from like 2015 onwards, right? And 2016 is really, really where he kind of started leveling up and then crowning glory in 2017. I look at some of his more recent years, I'm like, well, okay, actually Worlds was really quite poor from you, or actually, well, we went in as favorite and you didn't do that very well in 23 or 25, for instance. Those are knocks against him, whereas I think that Deft, 2022, I'm like, yeah, you're good, but surely we don't expect anything from you. And he still managed to do it anyway. That weighed very heavily in his favor.
I've got an angle on the criteria as well, which is this. I've thought about this a lot because obviously one of the things with all the shows I do is we have a lot of GOAT and BOAT discuss who's the best, who's the greatest. One of the problems I have is this. I actually think longevity is used incorrectly as its own category. In my opinion, longevity is an attenuating subcategory. As in, the real thing that you have to have, in my opinion, to even be allowed in this conversation. Because notice, we're not doing greatest, because I do think in the modern day, from listening to a lot of people have these conversations in sports and esports, greatest most people basically mean who had the best career, which involves winning things. It just does. It starts with that, and then obviously you just take out people who weren't very good at the game and they just won because they were the teammates. And at the end, you've got Faker and Deft and all these Meiko, the people who won everything, basically. Yeah. So to me, when you say best, you actually mean level of play. You mean who was individually, the clicks and the mouse keys, who was the best overall at that. And in my opinion, the first thing that allows you into it is your peak has to be potentially the best ever. So there has to be a moment where you really were just at that moment, like the best ADC ever, the best player ever, whatever. Then the point is, I understand, yes, you can have a bunch of people who had a year though that they're amazing. That's where, yes, if then one person who is in the same conversation has 4 years like that and the other guy has 1, that's a pretty good way to pick between them. I think then longevity becomes a good attenuating factor. And also similarly, I can tell you, because right now we have this problem in Counter-Strike. We have a guy in Counter-Strike called Donk, who's a young Russian player who might have just had the best first 2 years any player's ever had in Counter-Strike. Yeah, but the problem is, even though he's also won championships, it's hard to just then go, right, forget history, you're already the GOAT. Instead, most people think you've got to do a couple more years of that, then we'll give you that title. So spoiler, like maybe 2 years, maybe everyone will already say he's the best ever and he's better than Simple and Z were all the greatest ones. But I think people are sort of, I actually do think people are coming to a general consensus in that regard. So I also think, by the way, the reason this is a really good discussion on this first role is because isn't ADC also quite an interesting role in that regard? Like, notice a lot of the contenders for the GOAT discussion on this one have great longevity. Like, there's a lot of ADCs that have hung in there like a solid half a decade plus, and that's in a game where actually, like you say, sometimes you will just get random periods where for like a split or half a year, the meta's turned on its head. And if you were the guy who didn't play the Zeri or you don't know Phelios, you might just be having a hard time. So I also think for ADC especially, much like their role in the game, you have to be able to sort of survive the hard times and stay relevant to some degree and then get through to the period where your champions come in the meta and you can kind of make hay while the sun's out.
And then there's another interesting factor, particularly for this role, is that we've actually seen a lot of games in very important moments between these contenders as well.
Oh, yes.
So obviously there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say stuff about Uzi. Well, Deft was like stomping on Uzi for years. I mean, obviously he was there from 2015 and not there during 2013 and 14 where Uzi was a little higher. And then you had obviously Deft kind of going back to Keria after certain points too. But like we've had some great games between them. Of course, when Viper came around, we've seen tons of matches between Ruler, Viper and Deft between all of them as well. Less of like Uzi in his prime versus those ones, but we did have a little bit of Viper versus Uzi for that too, right? But yeah, we have a lot of that there.
I mean, I think part of the problem as well is the different overlaps in eras, right? Because Uzi, you could say, was at his peak at a time when before all of these other AD carries were around, right? And arguably played with worse teammates than them. Yeah, so sure. I think that's part of the problem. I think the conversation comparing like Viper, Deft, and Ruler is a very interesting one for sure. But to me, I think it's a little bit like tennis, right? Which is that most people I think who are tennis fans think Djokovic is the best tennis player of all time at this point, right?
Yep, that's the consensus.
He won the most. But the problem is that for me, who watched, Federer and Nadal and all these, he was coming in to his prime at the time when these guys were already on their way down.
Federer was 30 already, for example.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And even Nadal, I can't remember the difference in ages between
I think he would have been like 28, but you'd also had a lot of injuries too. So there are, I know what you mean. There are factors you can shade in, yes.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I mean... but since I'd be curious, you go first for this one, Thorin, because you talked about your criteria.
Well, here's what's funny. Even though actually maybe I'm wrong on this one, I thought this was going to be the spiciest one because, as you saw, you could put 4 names straight on the board that, depending on your era or country you like, you can go crazy arguing either way. And actually, the reason why if I think generally about this topic, one of my pet peeves is that I think a lot of fans, the same fan that tells me Thorin, shut up, going on about Froggen, that was ages ago, then tells me about how Uzi is the greatest player ever. Because he made worlds. Like, that was the same era, boys. That was about 12 years ago. Like, which is it? Does stuff count or doesn't it? So, to me, I've always thought the fact that fans... Remember, the reason this topic's spicy too, forget ADC, most fans kept that their default locked and loaded opinion that Uzi was the second greatest player for most of history until recently when people had to realise, because some people like Ruler, maybe we need to revisit these rankings, boys. So, funny thing is, I actually have the same top 2 as Nymaera did. In fact, the same top 3 even. Here's why it's actually... I'll be interested to see where Peter goes. So here's why it sort of tortures me. Personally, I have always had Deft as my number 1 ADC because his longevity is amazing. He got to the top not long after Uzi as well. And I think you look at his game, it's the only player I think that had everything at ADC. Like at the beginning of his career, he was the one that actually wasn't even the laner. You had to get him through the lane so he could be the late game team fight carry. So he was almost more like a reckless type figure. Then if you remember, by the time he got to LPL, they leveled him up in that regard, mate. And he became just like the shit in lane. And then by the time he came back to Korea and he had that Korean super team with KT, that was like he was the fucking early game pressure god, etc. So I think his longevity is unreal. I think his peaks are amazing. He's done almost every style of ADC. Also, by the way, you think about, you pick some of these guys, people often criticise the champion pool of ADCs. Mate, Deft in every era is relevant on all the best champions. It's unbelievable. Like, I can almost not pick an era where this guy was like out of the meta to some degree. And he has all the classics too. Like a lot of the champions are other people's champions. The Caitlyn, so he has those too. He's fucking unbelievable on these. So I do think for me, Deft gets to be number 1. The more interesting discussion, which is what this discussion was, which is who's the second best. I do think you raise a very interesting discussion between Ruler and Viper, not least because if this is the GOAT one, well, it's easy. It just gets to be Ruler, doesn't it? Because of all the championships. Yeah. But I think if you look at the level of play, the key thing for me is this. I have always low-key thought Viper was actually better than Ruler. The difference is Ruler's been in better teams, and I do think what Ruler is asked to do, which is more traditional ADC type play, like just clean up a team fight. I think he is unbelievably good at that. But I also agree with what Nymaera says. I think actually Ruler, here's a hot take, but people have heard it before. I think actually one of the smartest things Ruler ever did was fucking team up with both Chovy and Knight. Because every time he then failed, they just took all the flack of that because they already had the faker fans on their arse every time they lose to say they're the reason they blow. Even though if you ever watch some of those tournaments, Ruler definitely put his shift in fucking up those matches too.
Is a lot of Ruler. Actually, I love the guy, but like Worlds 23 and Worlds 25 are largely on Ruler.
So that's my problem there is this. If I look at just the level of play, I can go either way on that one. I probably would go to Ruler. Yours has more longevity in theory, but the difference is I have always thought if I'm Viper, he's the guy where in my sort of, if I want to make this like EU ADCs, the same reason I'm a big fan of Upset is, it's like, mate, if you want to compare Upset and Reckless, can we redo their careers and have Upset playing Reckless's teams, please? Can he play with Yellow Star and Hills, like, all those players at that time? So same thing with Viper and Ruler. If I was Viper, I'd be like, just give me a crack at his teams, mate. Give me his spots. Put me in that spot in Worlds and I'll beat T1. So I'm actually touched on that. I want to see where Peter comes in on this one. Part of me wants to put Viper, but I probably do put him third, to be fair.
Okay, so for me, my criteria I think is a little bit different. So obviously longevity matters, but for me, what I cared about most was who had the biggest difference in ranking, versus other people in their role, right? So
who was the furthest ahead?
Who was the furthest ahead, but who also, if they're in a team with a bad player, with like a really with worse teammates, and they're able to raise the level of their teammates, and they're able to push them further, then to me that's a huge benefit.
Okay.
Because I League of Legends, if you're on a winning team, it's so easy to look good.
Yes.
It's really easy to look good, especially if you're AD carry. And I mean, part of the problem I think with this question is that it's so The problem is that it's the eras are so different, right? And I think so for me, Uzi is one of the greatest players of all time, right? My problem with ranking Uzi against Deft, Viper, Ruler is that when he was playing, when he was at his peak, China was so far behind Korea that basically, even trying to get any wins, even getting to a world final twice as a Chinese team in 2013, 2014 is absurdly impressive.
2013, I think you can make a contest for, because actually I think Chinese teams are actually a lot better than people remembered in 2013. 2014, yeah, I think there has never been a time where a region has been so far ahead of the world, and they did technically do that through the bracket, which didn't meet the Samsung teams, which definitely helped in 2014. But your point stands true. Yeah, obviously it's a huge bonus for that.
But I mean, this is the part of the problem, right? Because Uzi's lows are really, really low, right? Like, who can forget his OMG run, right? And that's part of the problem. I don't think it's feasible to compare. So, ironically, I'm just literally about to do this, right? But I don't think it's fair to compare kind of Uzi with the others, because the criteria you would have to use are so different that it's either biases in favor of Uzi or biases in favor of the other AD carries, depending on the weighting you give, right?
You're the person that people invented the hypothetical gun to your head. That's why that phrasing exists for you, Pete, to force you to make a choice.
Yeah, but I mean, gun to my head, if I'm who's the AD carry I want playing for my life, right? It's Uzi, right? That's the guy who I'm going to pick. Okay. But you're asking me who the best AD carry of all time is. I can't feasibly rank Uzi as the best because of his body of work, Okay, so actually, my criteria is slightly different from yours, which is I actually have Viper as number one, and I have Viper as number one because I think that his peaks have been higher. I think that often he's had a lot of unfortunate quarterfinal exits at Worlds, but I can't remember a quarterfinal where he was the one to blame. No. It's literally his team just evaporating around him.
This last one was probably the best one ever, wasn't it? I actually said, I don't know if he did a click wrong in that match, but what was his
I had him as my AD carry of the tournament because of that, despite going out in quarterfinals, which is very rare to do because he just didn't have the semifinals and the final stats to kind of back that up.
Yeah, and if this happened, if it was literally every single time he lost in the World's quarterfinals, I wouldn't be able to have him as the best of all time. But he does have his World's win, and he was exceptionally good at that World's win. Yes. But let me put it this way: if he didn't have that World's win, he's not in the conversation as the others. But because he does have that, that leads me to have more faith in my eyes, if that makes sense. Because my eyes are telling me, when you're passing the eye test, this guy is playing incredible and his team is just running him, right? Yeah. But if he was losing in every single quarterfinal, then I would be maybe there's something going on here that
I can't lie. The lawyer for the defense is winning me over on this one. He's sort of getting to me. I guess he's not going to be number one. Def's number one, but for number two, I might. I'm so tempted to switch it to.
I was really close on Ruler versus Viper anyway. The thing which really kind of puts my antenna up for Viper is just how good he did when the meta moved away from marksman.
Yeah.
So when it's stuff like he's the best Vladimir bot lane player of all time.
Yes.
You could put this guy on if you just clicked random and champion select, Viper is most likely to be best at any champion out of all champions in the roster to crop up, which is a very rare thing to say. Probably because they're so typecast into their own role already carries, and that was one of the big things which affected people like Double Lift and Reckless back in that time. Who were absolutely great up until that point. They struggled like hell. I mean, that's why we saw stuff like Reckless bench himself when he was having to play like Janna, and things like that, because it's just not something they've been tested on before. Whereas Viper was best in the world by quite a long way, and then he managed to retain that kind of best in the world going into LPL and having stuff like the Lucian in 2021. The Lucian Nami, he was the best in the world of that, which has become one of the iconic bot lanes. I just have to remember stuff like Ruler in 2017, where it was all about AD carry, though, and he won that with the Ardent Sense and meta. In terms of overall peak, I actually think the peak of Ruler versus Viper is pretty fucking close. Just Ruler was so good at the AD carry-centric meta.
But the interesting thing about Ruler and Viper is they won their worlds in an AD carry-centric meta, right?
Yeah, true.
Would you have said that Deft was the best player on his team in that world's win? Because to me, it was Zeka.
He peaked really, really hard. Yeah, he did.
That's fair. I mean, okay. To quickly summarize the way my ranking, I have Viper number one, Deft number two, ruler number 3. I think that basically ruler. A lot of the mistakes Ruler is making, and I'm not saying Ruler is bad, right? Like, I literally have him as like a top 3.
Oh, he's third best of all time.
Third best of all time, yeah.
and we're all clear that these 3 are like a tier above. It's literally like a 9.83
This
versus
is
a
the pantheon.
9.82, right? Okay.
Yes.
So within this category, I think there are times where he has been carried by his teammates and by his teammates' consistency, and because he's able to take more of those risks, right?
Yes.
Versus some of his other teammates, right? So to me, that's why I marked that against Ruler. I would say Ruler's peak, like 2017. It was 2017, Like in that meta, that was a kind of an easy meta to play AD carry, and if we're being brutally honest,
it was, but he was the best at it. So
he was the best at it, right? He would like. I think that is the meta that I would have said that he is like the undisputable best player in the world. Like, I mean, he won worlds with like not very high quality players, right? But for the reason that you said about Deft, like Deft's longevity, I think like Deft has been the second best AD carry in the world for many years more than anyone else.
And I think that he's also, but he has been the best. I think like people forget like his early career of like 2014 and 2015. Oh my God, this guy was good. I mean, his time,
but so was 2015. I agree. 2014 Imp was pretty freaking good.
No, Imp was fantastic, but then I think Imp was better at Worlds, right? And most of Samsung White was, but like Deft and Imp were close, and I think you could argue his second there. But Samsung Blue versus Samsung White, that's just a very interesting topic in general, and it's one of my favorite topics, which is the best teams to not win Worlds. Samsung Blue is very close to the top of that. But I think 2015, when he kind of got onto his Jinx bullshit, that was when he really took off. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think also that at the time, in a lot of the times where Deft was in China, were the way that China was playing the game was a little bit more AD carry friendly than the way
for sure. Well, it was kind of inheriting from Uzi, right? Okay, so we have now spent like 20 minutes on just AD carry.
Listen, every role won't be like that though. Come on, certain roles will be shorter. Come on.
So I go Viper as number 1 because I think that his peaks were more impressive.
Yes.
Winning worlds with a Chinese team, I think, is very, very, very impressive. I think that he often has situations where I think he's the best player in the series in at least 2 Worlds quarterfinals, or the second best player in the series, but his team is like 7, 8, 9. Like they get what's the thing that they have on op.gg when you're on the losing team?
Oh the ace, ace,
ace,
right.
yeah. Okay, so many times I think where he's the ace, and like I said, because he has the world's win, that's the reason why I trust my eyes a little bit more. And then I put Deft second for the reasons that you say, and then I put Ruler third.
By the way,
and I shout outs to Uzi and Jackie Love, who I think maybe if they'd been in Korea, maybe they would have developed in ways that would have.
By the way, we won't do a whole segment on this, but spoiler, Jackie Love's name should have been in this list, but when you fail that many worlds in a row and you're one of the reasons why, that just precludes you. I'm sorry, the others didn't. Like, as much as I trashed Ruler earlier, the joke is Jackie Love looks at Ruler and goes, "Can I get your career? Like, give me a break." You know what I mean? Like, he had even more failures. And I've also been tricked every year telling people don't watch the LPL. Don't worry, Jackie Love's going to do it this year, and then he never does, so...
I mean, if it was most entertaining of all time, number 1, but yeah.
Sure.
So just keep this in mind. Second question that we're doing today. He doesn't qualify, but this guy is at the back of my mind.
And also, I will say, I do understand what Peter means on like a philosophical level. If someone did say, gun to your head, you die if this AD carry doesn't carry this game. But I cannot just pick the player. I can pick, this is the Uzi in his absolute best, he would win the game. I'm with you. Like, the real problem, as you said though, Peter, is there's also the down years of Uzi, the bad games. And if one of those bad games spawns in, that's some Jackie Love at world shit. So... You never know that
like,
one.
You could never pick.
All right, here's what we're going to do. So we know how to operate the time. We'll do what I think is the other most contestable position of all, which has got to be jungle, surely, boys. Like, jungle is insane. Who the fuck's the best jungler of all time?
Yeah, and even deciding like the shortlist gets quite difficult because...
And isn't it the ultimate role also that like what teammates do have since the ultimate one for that, isn't it? Yeah.
So how do you actually... You have to go by eye test, and I don't think this is the role where I think tournament wins matter the least.
Agreed.
So number one, obviously very difficult. I'm going to start out with a shortlist, and then if you want to add anyone else to that, we can start whittling it down. That for my shortlist is Canyon, Score, Peanut is on there, and then I started getting a bit wild with it, and I was wondering who else could actually qualify. I think Owner is actually on the fringe, somewhere in the list. He has to be in the conversation. And the last one is actually Karsa. I think that Karsa actually deserves to have a conversation about him. Who else do you add onto that list and why? And the short list. Anyone else that we cropped up around it?
I mean, I only had a top two for this list. To me, like it's much clearer than this. But now you mentioned Karsa, like I think. Holy moly! Let's have a talk about Karsa a little bit later. I haven't even thought about Karsa, but let's have a talk.
I mean, he by the way, he does mean like just for the shortlist, and we'll remove them, and he won't be like anyone's. But it's where this is why I say I think it's the hardest role because, for example. Like the other thing that junglers have that is unique to their role, in my opinion, is every single jungler, maybe not Score, I don't know why he's an alien, every single jungler otherwise has really bad periods where they look like a fool as well. Like everyone saw all the Peanut Worlds. People will know like fucking Karsa had some LPL. Mate, he got benched in the end in fucking that V5 team.
That Weibo team.
There was some hard times in these squads. So like even though I'm scared to even say the name, if we're just going off pure talent and again the peak of like if that's an angle on this day, was this person the best? I'll say it even though the laughs can echo after me. Tian. Mate, peak Tian on his day is a fucking demon.
For peak.
On peak. On his worst, he's a nightmare. Don't worry. Yeah, but on his peak, he's fucking good, mate. He's good.
Yeah. It's just it falls into the Jackaloff problem again, right, for him.
Yes.
Oh, God. I mean, there's maybe a world in which you talk about Tarzan, but he has even less tournament success than the others, right? But he probably has to be like, in terms of peak, that ephemeral world, right? Those are the names which floated around my mind.
So what's the order then? Come on, hit with the top two.
So what's the order?
Because I think this is the hardest number one pick of all, by the way. I think it's easily the hardest.
I think I have gone with Canyon then Score. That's been my number 1 and 2. But I did have to entertain like Owner, Karsa, Peanut. Those are the other ones which came about there to lesser and greater degrees. Canyon, I think that a lot of people have now kind of, because we're now a couple of years removed from that, and also now he's not playing very well right now. Canyon in peak form, in peak meta, is probably the most unbeatable jungler which I've ever seen. He is the person that takes over the game and actually becomes a carry and a game-winning factor the most when he was in his peak meta. With stuff like, I think particularly look around like MSI, well, Worlds 2020 and then into MSI 21. This guy was like just levels above so many other people. And I'm aware that they obviously didn't end up winning MSI 21, but oh my God, this guy was good. In terms of like the farming jungle meta, the invading jungle meta as well. There was just something really, really special about watching Canyon, Showmaker as a duo, just pull out just magic. Even when they didn't have a good bot lane at points and actually the meta went more towards that, they could still make magic happen. And Canyon has been one of the best junglers at playing around topside in the history of League when he played around people like Nogari and Khan. Just levels above on that front. And despite the fact that I think that this probably compared to some other roles, particularly, it is it's a shorter period of time.
Yes.
I still think he comes in at number 1 for me just because of how high he peaked. And now just no one was even on the same like playing field as him when he was at peak. And then, God, I do put Score second, but a real shout out to Peanut, who... Peanut was a guy that invented a lot of our facets of jungling, much in the same way that Score did too. Peanut never quite got to be the actual bride. He never actually got to be that person who everyone accepted, best jungler in the world. Nothing's coming between that and that. And I know I'm saying that compared to Score, who famously never found that success internationally, but got at least Score in those early years. There was just, I mean, I know that Monty was the real flag bearer for Score, but he had every right to be right. Because Score is probably the most cerebral jungler of all time. And you can look back now to what he did during any year of his play and think, okay, I understand exactly why he's doing it, and no one else understands why at that moment of time, and that's crazy.
Yeah, and I think Score was really, really far ahead of kind of everyone else when he was at his peak, with the possible exception of like maybe what we're going to say, Dandy.
Yeah.
Peak Dandy was really far above.
Obviously, Dandy doesn't belong in this discussion, right? But when Score, like I think that Score basically fundamentally changed what it meant to be a jungler. And I think a lot of the innovations, I think a lot of the reasons why Keria Korean junglers were so far ahead of Chinese junglers for a long time is because basically Korean junglers were studying from Score and Chinese junglers were studying from Clear Love. Respect to Clear Love. Like, I mean, I'm not saying he's not one of the best Chinese players of all time, but like, the way that they were playing the game were very, very different in terms of the aggression. I think that there was a kind of style that Score and Danny a little bit pioneered, which I think obviously found its apex in Canyon, and for me that's kind of the reason why I have those two. So I don't have Peanut as high. Again, Peanut's in my top 5, but I think that there's a gap after the top 2 simply because I think Peanut has often really, really struggled in like those. When I was talking about the eye test for Viper, the eye test for Peanut has often.
This was the killer for SKT 2017, right? People forget about it, but SKT 2017, that was while Peanut was. That was when he was like in his metamorphosis stage, right, where he's going from being the Battle Ward jungler invader, and then it hit this fucking weird point in time where everyone had to play Ivern, and he just wasn't the Ivern player at that point. He was eventually, but he just wasn't at that point.
It took him time.
It took him some time. That was a weird time in general, by the way. I think this is something which I think will apply to every single role on this list. The early years of League, you didn't expect, nor did you see examples of people who are good at every style of champion. At that point, you had carry players or tank players or support players. Particularly in mid lane, you had like assassin or mage players. Top lane, really, you had like carries or tanks. And you didn't see the blend of the two. I mean, outside of like Faker, up until probably 2018 when you had like, Rookie and TheShy as those two dual lanes, which those solo lanes who could do whatever the hell they wanted to. Particularly for like the 2015 to 2017 era, you had this kind of hangover from the early days of League where you'd have people like Peanut that was so damn good at one thing. And in case of Peanut, it was the battle warding and the kind of carrying and invading style. But he didn't quite, at that point, 2017, and the low points, as Peter was mentioning, were really quite low at then.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that impacts him. Just one more thing in favor of Canyon, I would just say, like, the fact he can play Nidalee. Like, the fact he can play Nidalee and get away with picking Nidalee in situations you just should not. As, like, you're watching this game and you're
hey,
like,
that used to be Peanut. That used to be Peanut.
Sure.
He was the best Nidalee
like,
in the world, 2016, 2015.
I've seen Canyon literally pick Nidalee with no CC and just completely destroy the game, Like, literally, range support, mage mid, like, and get away with it. So I would put, that's why I put them. The one person, but again, with jungle, I think it's more who learned the most. Like, who had the biggest impact on what it meant to be a jungler. And I think Karsa is a good shout out because there were several years where, people were saying why Flash was known as the Korean killers, right? And the reason Flash Wolves were known as the Korean killers is they would go and pick pushing mid for Maple, invading jungle for Karsa, and just get in the Korean team's face and just like try to snowball the game from minute one in a very, very aggressive way that teams weren't really prepared for. But the Korean teams would often take the shock that they suffered at MSI and then adapt by the time Worlds came. And then,
by the way, he even last year at Worlds in his like this, the really bad PSG talent roster, he actually shocked Lee and Genji in early game and still very nearly did something in those games too, which is crazy given like how far he was in his career. He was in a slump. He come back out of retirement. He's like, I'll throw an early game out on like Neferi at Worlds when it's out of meta, and he almost got one over them.
Yeah. And I mean that's kind of the tragedy, like with Karsa. It's so many times that he's almost. The number of almost this guy has in his career is tragic. And I say that having said Score is number 2, but yeah, really good shout out. I haven't even considered him, but yeah. I had the 2 for those reasons.
Well, the only downside here is actually playing against my whole idea of these. I have the same top 2, so apparently it's not as complicated as I thought. But it's good. The convo is good. That's why these convos took like 20 minutes each. But sadly, I have the same 1 and 2. Here's what's funny. Normally, this would be the one where I would want to be like, people have overrated Canyon, because I do think compared to the other 2 we're putting in Peanut and Scott, he doesn't have the same longevity. Even actually, ironically, I think the last couple of years has been a bit carried. I actually think he has I wouldn't put the Genji era in for Canyon. This is all down one period for me. But I do think, again, if we're doing that thing where you start with the peak, I don't believe anyone eye test wise has ever looked as good as peak Dam 1 Canyon. Because the difference is, when I go to Score, a lot of that is cerebral. It's things that are inferred. Like, I'll give you the example. I'll do it in contrast. I do think Score, bearing in mind he plays the role of jungler, which was almost designed to be blamed because it can't be in 3 places at once, as every jungler will tell you. He is one of the only players I've ever seen who lost a lot of game 5s and championships, where when I went back back and even went to people who were nerds like the Emily Rands and the Kelsey Moses of the world who studied the shit out of jungle and stuff. Like, this is one of the only people where, again, he was almost blameless. Like, you can watch the game and, like, he pathed correctly. Like, he got the gank off, he did the thing here. It's just either his team lost a team fight or he missed a smite or something, you know, something relatively minor. The difference is, though, a lot of that was the brain jungling. I agree. Like, by the way, people always say the reason why the LPL rose up and won and Keria fell off was the Tracker's Knife era of, like, the nerf to that, right? He was the ultimate Tracker's Knife jungler. It's like what Peter says, everyone basically copied this style of play because it was basically all about, funnily enough, not early game jungling. It was just like being a master of the mid game. If you mastered the vision control and how to move on the mid game, you basically just won the chess match every time. And the problem was the LPL was trying to play fast checkers and Keria was just checkmating and playing chess the whole time. So it's actually why, funnily enough, to tie onto the Karsa thing, that's why the genius of Karsa was realising, don't let them have a mid game. Just attack them super early and let's stop the game right now. Yeah, that actually has a logic to it. It's why it was sort of the soft counter, wasn't it? So, yeah, and then the problem I have is, though, to bring it back to Canyon, though, yes, the longevity was shorter, but I'm with all you guys. Like, first of all, at his actual peak, he had both amazing pathing and feel for the game, but then also, like, impossible mechanics. Like, spoiler, it's going to be the same for me when we get to Keria for support. Everyone else can have their arguments and their reasons they're the best, but no one has the mechanics this guy does. Like, these two players, Canyon and Keria, like, they should have just been born as mid laners or ADCs. It's so insane they even play these roles. Like, remember, to some degree, jungler and support is like in football, where, like, who the fuck chooses to be a defender? Like, you do that when you're forced to. You can't be a winger. These are the Maldinis of the world where, like, they're actually the best and they have all the fucking skills as well. Like, it's just too OP. And I agree with you on the Nidalee one especially, because, bro, some of those Nidalee games, remember there was even one at, like, a Worlds, like, he also has some of those games where it's like, he isn't the reason they lost. He was actually the one reason they had a chance to win the game. It's insane, some of the games I've seen this guy pull off.
Yeah, I think a funny thing about that, talking about, you know, should have been born as a different role and whatever, that also brings in the conversation of someone like Ambition, right? He's not on my list, but he's just, whenever you talk about jungle, I think it's really interesting to talk about him because he basically said that, you know, I knew that in mid lane, if I worked really hard, I could maybe, like, compete with, like, Rookie or Faker when they're in their peak era of, you know, 2014, 2015 odd. And he was like, but I'm never going to be the best. I can hang with them and I won't get blown out, but I'm never going to be the best. But if I switch to jungle, I can be the best. I think the interesting thing from probably...
Also, how mid laners do think about the game, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think that it's very interesting. About 2018 onwards, that's when we had, like, the Conqueror meta coming through, and we had, like, Warrior Enchant. That's, I think, realistically, from about 2018 to 2021, 22, jungle was the most powerful role in the game by far. Maybe support was in there too. And I think that Canyon being the best jungler in the world when he kind of came in during jungle's peak meta of power compared to the other roles, that also really works in his favor for him too, because just, oh my god, when this guy was walking around, like, you know, just getting all of this kind of carry potential later into the game was just unstoppable. I suppose that also works in the favor of someone like, you know, even someone like Jankos, right? You could probably have, like, again, doesn't quite make my shortlist, but actually, again, like 2019, the fact that actually Jankos very briefly was actually best jungler in the world, maybe for a point. I mean, that's actually incredible during that era as well of, like, 2018, 19 odd of, like, oh my god, this actually guy can actually compete. That was crazy against some of the names they're throwing out there.
And I mean, I think that this is something people tend to, like, undervalue, but, like, Jankos has been the best jungler in the world. Like, I mean, like, and people are, oh, you know, this is just hindsight bias, you know, oh, he just had Caps. No. Caps wouldn't have been able to look as good as he did without Jankos, like, actually being Jankos at his peak.
Also, by the way, the same point you're making for Canyon here, which is also why I agree, I think he's the best, by the way, because the difference is, people forget this, essentially every damn one team was just OP jungler mid, plus hopefully the top lane is really good. That was every damn one, sir. They almost never had a good bot lane, they never gave a shit about the bot lane. Like, in faith, that also not only made him shine more, but I agree, the difference is, if we're contrasting, the reason why I think a lot of us revere Score is, he played in the era where jungle was sacrificial as fuck. He wasn't like some super strong Nidalee that was carrying the game. He had to basically transfer his leads and his advantages to laners who might then fuck the game up. Like, that's just the world he lived in. So I think that's also why I think it's quite fair he's number 2, but we didn't put him number 1.
Like, any jungler who was around during the Gragas era of jungling and was great, that's a different breed of jungler. Like, Gragas jungler, when you were actually making impact, you were, like, best jungler in the world, that was something special. Because, like, you had the shotgun engage of, like, you just had to get it right, and Score was the best at that. So I think very interestingly, we've come with the same top 2 in there. But I thought that's, you know, it's interesting interesting to talk about some of the other outliers like that, right? Because
I predict that. First of all, I guarantee there's no way we have the same two top laners. I don't believe the three of us collectively can have the same two. And spoiler, I already know for mid it's not going to be. So don't worry. So do you want to do top lane now? Should we go to top lane?
All right, does someone have a short lane?
Let's go support.
You want to go support?
We've already talked about Keria.
Okay.
So.
Okay, sure. Okay, well, this one is interesting, then. This one's interesting. Okay, so does anyone have anyone even remotely close to Keria and Meiko? Does anyone have anyone else on the list there?
Yeah, that's
because that's the top two. Because the only way this gets interesting is if you think that Marta or Beryl have to be somewhere close. I don't think many other people even get close on that list. Beryl and Marta, I think you've got some different kind of arguments for their peak or succeeding without Faker or succeeding against Faker. But I think that realistically, Keria and Meiko are like the easy top two, unless your criteria say like, oh, well, you know, Meiko had the longevity, but actually was he the peak of someone else, like, you know, multi-worlds winning without Faker of someone like Beryl or the pioneering of Marta, right? Sure. That's a pretty easy top two, but where does the conversation go?
I think that's a top two. I think the interesting one is whether you're going to count, you know, Ming, for instance. You know,
Ming, an interesting
somebody who's pushing Meiko for number two. But no, for me, it's like Keria very clear for the reasons that Thorin mentioned on the last point. He's just so far ahead of everyone mechanically. He just does. He's the guy that you fucking hate that he exists as a coach because he's playing Caitlyn and Varus support, and your support wants to play Caitlyn and Varus support because of course that's what they're doing in Korea, and you just have to sit them down and be like, you're
not him.
Say you are not good enough to play this champion without saying like you're bad. You know, it's just like you have things that make you good. You have things that make you special. You have your own strengths. You should play to your own strengths, right? The number of times I've tried to have that conversation with a support who just wants to play like Caitlyn every single game, you know, because Keria can do it, so of course I can do it. No, you can't do it, right? Like, with respect, you know, there's many other things that you can do really, really well. So that's why because of the amount of pain that Keria has caused me as a coach over the years, that's why he's like clear number one. Meiko for longevity, I think Ming had higher peaks, but much shorter period of time.
I'll just throw this out there. I'll be slightly mean to Pete, even though I'm going to agree with him, which is this. Here's why Ming doesn't get to be top two. Even though if you do raw peak, I think he was actually excellent. Like, by the way, I also think one of the more underrated pairings is him and Uzi. Like, they have the same vision for the game. If you wanted to make a smash the bot lane, that might be the best to ever do it, mate. That was unbelievable. Now, true, that's all they tried to do. But here's the way I'm going to be slightly mean to Peter. You can't simultaneously go, oh, my UCI, he's like 1v9, and then in his lane he's got the goat support. Which is it, homie? Which is it? And I know he didn't have him the whole time, but even so, I'm just saying, because I do think Ming deserves to be in the conversation, but he gets kicked out. By the way, this role is the most obvious 1-2 of all time. Like, and also we've got the problem. Like, I'll tell you the problem if you're Meiko. If you're Meiko, you haven't done anything wrong to be number two, mate. You had a fabulous career where you won literally everything. You had insane longevity. You played with every type of player. I even showed people when I wrote a Substack article on this. Bro, here's what's crazy about Meiko. Even at the end of EDG, when the team had fallen off completely, there's a split, bro. They don't even make the playoffs. I think they're like 9th, and they still vote him all LPL third team. Bro, in the LPL, they do like the LCK. You have to be a top team to do that. That means all the players and coach in the LPL were like, this guy's still the shit. He's still just the man. Like, we don't care what his teammates are like. You know, if he loses in the game. You
can argue the same this split, actually. IG are not a good team now, and Meiko is still top 3. For me, he's number 2.
Yeah, but here's the problem. I say all of that, and then the bot it's a bit like Canyon to me. I just said it earlier. The real problem is this. Keria has almost all the same strengths and qualities that I just listed off for Meiko, but then at the end of it, he also has mechanics that, like, I just saw it literally today, boys. I saw the Pike game today. It's mechanics defy belief. Like, when you see the things he can do, again, you look and you just go, this is why, sadly, for the past episode, this is why I never rated Gumayushi as high. I'm like, mate, I think you actually play next to maybe, like, the third best player to ever play League of Legends, mate. Forget, like, support. Like, that. It's one, and as Peter says, I'll give a quick analogy for people if they don't know. This is actually a famous concept that started at the beginning of the Overwatch League. In Overwatch, there was a player for a team called the New York Excelsior, which was a Korean team, and they had a support player called Jonak, right? And this exact same problem existed, Peter. He took a character called Zenyatta, which is normally supposed to be a support that heals, and he made it a damage dealer that would carry the whole game. And as a result, the famous thing when we would do, because we did essentially when Monty was in that game, we did a show called Oversight, which was just like the summoning insight of Overwatch, basically. And on that show, when we would have coaches on, they'd say exactly what you're saying now. They'd say, the problem is my support player comes to me and goes, hey, coach, set me up like Jonaki. Like, bro, one, I'm not doing that. And two, he can do that. Like, so I agree with you. I actually think low-key, Keria also simultaneously was the best and broke the game and probably ruined the lives of about 100 pro coaches who were like, you're not playing Callista, you're not doing that, and in fact, go on the Lulu or some shit, like, it's just the most warping. Also, if we talk about role, traditionally that's supposed to be defender, it's supposed to be the least impactful role. In fact, the literal term of the role even is basically you're not even your own man, you're just helping this guy. But has there ever been a player from such a weak role who warped the game this much? It's alien. I mean, as we talked about, how many worlds did this guy just decide the meta of? It's crazy.
Yeah.
Very early on, you could argue someone like Mad Life or Edward, they changed the role in a pretty huge way to the point where actually they actually on broadcast back in like 2012-13, they actually called them support carries back then. And we had to bring that back out for Keria because he was doing the double range shenanigans. But the thing is, I think particularly in the modern day of League, compared to way back when, there are so many systems which you're integral to. Whenever you bring out something different, you better have a good eye on those systems too. If you're not someone that can ward safely, if you're not someone that can play early parts of the lane, if you can't roam on certain timers, like your champion is just not good on a pro level unless you can have such a big impact somewhere else. The special thing about Keria is that he could do all of those big things, which is why I think there is actually a shout out to Beryl, right? To him as opposed to someone, Keria.
I mean, for map impact and things like that, absolutely.
Yeah, but I think that Beryl also did the weird shit, stuff like the Zillion support at points, like the Jin Zillion was not that T1 also did that too. The Maokai support in Worlds 21, right, where they kind of used like the Jin Maokai to really mess with T1 there too. Like he's definitely like deserving of the conversation. I just don't think he's there in the top two with the longevity and the peak of someone like Meiko, which can compete with Beryl. He's got a longer career, and I think that the peaks are actually obviously very, very high from Beryl, but Meiko's not like he's got bad peaks there either. But yeah, Keria is like the single most game warping person in his role since someone like TheShy or Faker, right? Which just kind of went crazy on their role and showed other people the true limits of the role.
But I just to sidetrack this slightly, I know we've talked about this topic for quite a long time, but it's interesting to me that we all see there's quite a gap between Meiko and the next highest, right? Is that just because Meiko would just be the best if Keria didn't exist? Just Keria is a freak of nature. It's just would that just be a clear conversation?
Yeah, no, I think after the last Worlds when you're once again Keria kind of turned it on and players like, well, we were asking for, we were wondering if it was like a lightning in a bottle, or that's a different term, or if it was just like a flash in the pan, just a season in. No, he's kind of done that on cooldown now for most of his career, which is the point where you sit there and think, nah, this guy's something just too special.
And I'll make another point as well. Another thing that is insane about Keria, to really drive home how insane his champion pool is, right? He might simultaneously, this doesn't even make sense, there's no roles like this. He might simultaneously be the best Pike and Bard player I've ever seen, which is like, I can tell you as someone who loves to play Pike, there's no overlap with those two champions whatsoever. Like, I'd even view them as on the opposite ends of the spectrum, like, that is absurd. Again, we have really great players who were like godlike assassins who could play the mage on the side, or they could play the mages with the odd Kali. It's very rare you would ever get a mid lane that's the best on both. Like that's also, I think, just OP as fuck. Like this guy had most of the meta champions, and then he just had this like unlimited champion ocean behind him where he could just do whatever he wanted. And sometimes, actually, as much as he copy at Worlds, sometimes he would warp the meta. Sometimes also he's the only one who could pick some of that shit. Like, I mean, by the way, a lot of people have now just discovered like you can't do the Keria Bard either, mate. The plays he makes there are also inconceivable.
Yeah.
Right, the last two are very potentially spicy, so...
Okay, let's save mid for last.
Of course.
We'll save mid for last, so we'll go with top lane. Yeah. Okay, top lane, I have probably my longest short list.
Yeah.
Again, top lane, the role changes all the time. We have seasons with lane swaps. We have them without lane swaps. We have... just incredibly different ways.
I mean, the seasons where you can barely play a carry, the seasons where you have to play the carry. It's a pretty harsh role,
Pre-2019, you had split pushes and duelists. Post that, it's much more about early teleport's always been a thing, but it's much more about team fighters and then dragon fights. So, the shortlist is, I think my first place, I'm actually going to lead off with that and then the rest of the shortlist, which is harder. My first place is still TheShy. He is my first place in terms of top lane role. In terms of second beyond that point, God, this is a hard one. I'm actually still kind of mulling it over, and I may change it in the course of this discussion. But I have Khan, Kiin, Bin, Zeus, Impact, Smeb, and Noggery. So that's 7 other people on the shortlist for very different reasons.
Peter, should we just knock this one straight out of the park? You actually coached Impact, but you're with me. He doesn't get to be on this list. Come on.
I mean, longevity. Like,
well, playing in the kids' end of the pool. Michael Phelps was in a real Olympic pool. He wasn't in the kids'
Impact is
pool.
on the end of the shortlist, okay? But I thought that actually he does deserve...
Listen, I was going to be polite.
He's been playing...
Boys.
He's been playing...
Sure.
13 years. I think Impact may be one of the how should I say this in a nice way? One of the wealthiest League of Legends players.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. By the way, he'll have had a 6-figure contract every year for like 10 years. Yeah, absolutely. Here's the problem, though.
I think 7.
I was going to be polite since we're not making the shortlist 15 names. I was even going to leave Flame off there. He doesn't even. But Flame's getting off the list. Impact can get the fuck off the list. Get off the list.
Impact's been taken off.
And you've said him already.
Right.
You give him the honourable mention. Okay. I agree. It's a long list. So you had
honourable mention.
What was the list?
I have somebody who was originally on my shortlist, but then I took him off because I thought it was a bit unethical. And that was Xiao.
Listen, for the peak here, yeah, it was pretty good.
Incredible for that 1 year, right?
Yeah.
Like, you talk about top laners with a high peak. Like, I mean, that guy had like...
And, you know, I'll tell you, to tie into what we said earlier, I'll tell you the worst thing he did there, also on some you've just ruined the game for everyone else mode. Bros, we're already spending, as coaches and analysts, all of our time trying to tell mid laners, I know technically your role's the hardest, but don't think it's the best. Those other roles are really good. Then some motherfucker like Xiao who goes like, I'm just going to go top lane for a while. What's that? I'm still the best in the world, and I'm the best on Lucian, and I'm shot calling too. This is easy. I might just go back mid. Like, you've just ruined the game for everyone. Now every mid laner really believes he can play top lane. Most of them couldn't, by the way, but they all believe they can now. They all think they can now.
I mean, part of the problem as well is that people forget this, but like Xiao crying is an MSI champion.
It's mental, isn't it? Probably the most forgotten MSI champion ever, by the way. No one can even tell me who played mid for that team. They can't remember it, boys. I'm telling you now.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
that was actually one of the funniest things. So, like, when I was casting LPL when I got there, it was just like, because, you know, you get your prep doc before every cast, and I was like, do I have to mention that Crion's an MSI champion again? I guess I kind of have to. One of the weirdest arcs, yeah. And but the whole team was just Wei and Xiaohu. It was
absolutely.
Just them just doing some godlike shit on top side.
Ming did his a little bit as well, right? But like,
for sure. It was
Wei and Xiaohu, and like, I mean, when we talk about peaks, I mean, we can't have this guy as the best top laner of all time because
no. But for that 1 year, it was glorious. So put it this way, that's the road untravelled, Peter. That was the alternate universe where he just stayed top lane. Maybe he would be at the top of this conversation. It would be certainly an interesting one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of other people I mentioned on there, including like obviously, which is very relevant to discussions which are happening this week. If we're going to talk about stuff with the Asian Games qualification, because Kiin is very high up my shortlist.
Some people have him as number 1, bro. That's real.
Yeah. Now, obviously, like I did say, TheShy is number 1, and I will qualify that later because, again, I think that guy is just a freak for his peak era. But I mean, I'm focusing the conversation around Kiin. I think the interesting thing about Kiin is that while he's never had the Dream Worlds experience for himself, I don't think he has been the problem on a bunch of those worlds, and I think his MSI wins were really, really crazy for him. And I don't think there's ever been any top laner as consistent as Kiin. And I know that consistency is not quite as high up as peak for for many others in terms of the criteria. But in this specific case, Kiin has been outworst a top 3 top laner now in the world. Since, well, when would you date it back to? 23? Would you even put it a year back before that as well? Yeah. I mean, Kiin has done the works to get himself to the top, but on every single team, he has been just this core pillar of how they play. And he has been one of those players that's been multi-talented in that too. He has been the carry, he has been the tank, he has been one of the best weak side and strong side.
By the way, he also gets to go in that thing you guys said earlier about Viper, where he also had the years where he was on those bladder freaks. He was still a stud. He was still just a fucking baller, mate. Yeah.
To the point where we were complaining that he was staying on those teams. Yes. He was clearly wasting years of his career. Yes. Luckily, he's had himself, what may be a swan song. I'm gutted that he we'll see what happens with Worlds, right? I'm gutted that he didn't get those Worlds kind of crowning glories on top of it. But Kiin is like, I'm not. Yeah, he's definitely within. He's probably top 3 minimum for me on that. But I'm still mulling it over in my head compared to some other names. Whether he gets the 2 over, quite a lot of recent top laners on this list because Kiin's there. But I also noted Bin and Zeus are actually on there too.
Yep.
And the thing about them is that I think that they've taken the carry top lane role of the modern era to another level. To the point where I think that things really changed around Bin and Zeus in a lot of ways in terms of the macro around how they could kind of rip the map open beyond the point where top laners had a lot of their individual power taken from them with dragon stacking, because you have to be at every dragon fight. You can't split push anymore. You can't do, well, obviously I've mentioned TheShy there, right? But even someone like Nogari, who did end up doing it just beyond that era, kind of going south as well. But even someone like Smeb right before that, where you could just take over a game from side lane advantage. Bin and Zeus still managed to do that even against the dragon meta. And they would do that, sometimes with or without jungle support. I think Zeus has probably been someone who's put more resources into him, but the payoff's been huge. Bin in 2024 was very interesting as a top laner because you could play to the opposite side of the map, and that also worked out in his favor because it meant that no jungler is top lane because both junglers are going bot, and he'll just take the even 1v1, and he can do that too. So I think that both Bin and Zeus are somewhere on that shortlist too, despite the fact that they're not, like many of the others on this, they're not people that started like 2015 or 2018 or whatever. They're a little bit newer to the list in terms of their top level performances, but I still think they absolutely.
Who was your number two then? Who did you pick for number two?
I think my number two is still Kiin, but I think that Bin and Zeus are really pushing that.
Okay. Because I will say this is the one where when I even write the shortlist of like 6 names, it feels wrong that like 3 of them don't get to be in my top 3. You know what I mean? Like this was the one where I feel like I'm being the rudest to whoever I have as 5th and 6th because they're all insane players. So Peter, where are you going on this one?
Me? So yeah, I have basically pretty much the same people that you had on your list, except for my honorable mention. But for me, it's slightly different. I meant when I was talking earlier about winning international competitions on a Chinese team. I think that's more impressive. I think being able to hard carry from top lane in metas which have been very, very unfavorable to top lane. I think it is a massive positive mark, and I think performances on bad teams are where you are like clearly the standout carrying your team, especially against international competition, is the best. Is really important, and that's why I've been at number 1. I would say been at number 1. Criteria: nobody plays top lane to the extent that BLG, the BLG are able to play top lane right now. Going into the first stand meta, so he's still at the top of his game right now. I will say that his first year was it his first year or his second year as a pro? Just let me quickly. First year as a pro, right?
Well,
first year
Suning 2020.
Yeah? When they made the world's final, right? And they don't make. He
was very young as well.
Him.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, to me, that is the mark of somebody of somebody who I rate extremely highly, right? Like the being able to carry like a Suning team where SOFM had a very, very good tournament, right? Angel was kind of like mid, Forg1ven was very streaky, right? But Bin was at his best was absolutely insane. I have Kiin at number 2 for the longevity argument. I think TheShy's peaks were very, very high. But if I'm not going to reward Ming and I'm not going to reward other people for those things, I have to have the longevity, right? Yes. My number 1s have often been people with the really high peaks. My number 2 have been longevity picks, and that's why I have Kiin at number 2.
Yeah, my problem with this one is, first of all, not just because they're Chinese. It basically Bin is the Uzi of top lane. Like, first of all, his team has to play around him all the time. Secondly, he has the exact same mentality of like, there's only one lane in this game. My lane, come to my lane. Like, by the way, as you might notice, Peter, I have a mad fucking soft spot for people like that. People who are like, just give me all the resources, I'll carry the fucking game. But the key thing is this. You notice I don't pick bombs. You have to actually then carry the game. I always used to tell people like Forg1ven this, like, mate, if you then don't carry the game, you're the arsehole. Like, if you ask for it all, it's actually, you can tell your coach you're being responsible if you then carry the game. That's the job of the person who's the carry. Go on, Peter.
But the difference between this is Bin is telling Knight this, whereas like other top laners are not telling Knight.
Yes.
My number 2.
No, I'm with you. But this way, it is different when Uzi goes, Zhao, chill this team, mate. When Bin's going tonight, like, I'll handle this one. It's like, yeah, you might be better than you, mate. That's the problem with this discussion, actually. So my problem is this. I have Bin as my 3rd. I have my number one. I can't believe, actually, I'm actually shocked Nymaera was with me also. I have TheShy still as my number one. The reason why is this. First of all, because he every year almost actually would still have one split where he looked like a complete bomb and ran it down. People do, unfortunately, who don't watch the LPL, they just think he only had that 1 year in 2018 or something. They think he actually is like some fluke player or something. But I always tell people, the whole thing that was infuriating about TheShy is, not only would he have a split that was terrible, but then like the same year he'd have a split that was the best shit you ever saw. And in fact, I'll even go one further. This guy would do that in an individual BO3. He'd have the greatest game one you've ever seen in your whole life into the most egregious game two ever, where he just threw the whole game. And then in game three, he might just win it back. So it was that whole like, oh, you. That was the whole thing with TheShy the whole time. I've never ever denied, like Dom, that he's a fucking, he'll throw a game. I always say, of the greatest players ever, I think he has the most egregious flaw to his game I've ever seen. Not least because I don't know any other great player that has the sheer gall to fucking throw some of the games this guy has. I've always pointed out on Summoning Insight, one of my biggest like fucking inside laughs ever has been reading all those interviews with TheShy, because I can't tell if he's trolling, because in the interviews he would say mad shit like, yeah, I would be talking to Rookie and I'd go, the others are really throwing these games, aren't they, but we're carrying them. And you'd just be going like, how is Rookie not just going, what you're doing that? But so anyway, I've never, and he also said stupid shit like, I don't believe at all, by the way, like in interviews, like, I sort of prefer to play the tanks. It's like, brother, you had to be benched at Worlds because you refused to actually just pick for the team. Like, but people forget that the
so
Worlds
funny.
he won, they had to bench him for a game. Shout out Kiin, by the way, what fucking G this coach must be. He had to bench him just to get him back and corral him back on the fucking ranch. Like, this guy was so off the reservation, it was crazy. But here's the problem. You can say all of that, but at the end of it all, who the fuck ever had the peak of this guy in top lane? I always tell people, even though this isn't even like the carry pick, it's all those games he used to have in like 2019 where he would play like Vladimir and then he would like kill people early game in lane. It's like, that's not even possible. That's actually not even possible. So I think at the height, no one's ever done it like this guy. I'm a big fan of a lot of top laners, a lot of carry top laners. Bro, even all my favourites, Flame, Khan, whoever you want, Bin now, they have all an amazing peak. But this guy's peak actually defied belief. Like, it genuinely made you just think, like, is this the best League of Legends player ever when he was at his peak? And I used to even think to myself, mate, I agree with the mid laners. Mid lane is the most OP role, but TheShy made top lane look OP, bro. So, sadly, even though I do think he had enough longevity to get me number one on this one, here's where it might get controversial. Already I can tell my number two is different. Let's get ready for a lot of people's feelings to get hurt. I am the guy who still thinks Smeb is number two. And here's why.
He deserves the talk, doesn't he?
Here's why. Because I'll tell you a piece of trivia. I've thought about all my angles for every discussion show, boys. I've had these discussions a million times. So here's the piece of trivia that instantly puts Smeb into this conversation. Here are the mid laners that Smeb went to Worlds with. Kuro and Yukal. Now, every other name on this list.
That's a good point.
Look at all the other names on this list. You want your Kiin deer? He's got Chovy, mate. Do you want fucking Zay's Faker? Do you want fucking Ben Knight? Mate, no. Everyone else has like a goat kind of... Who the fuck did Smeb have? And listen, I'll certainly give you this. He had Prey and Gorilla who were excellent pieces. He had Young Peanut when he was a stud. He had some good players. Later he played in a KT Super Team. I'm not denying he had talent around him. But I do think as well, this is another one of those players that he can do a lot with a little. And a bit like...
There's one other point here.
And a bit like the Zhao Hu angle, by the way, he also had that thing where, true, you're having to infer this by eye test, but he wasn't just playing top lane. He was also playing the map and he was playing the game too. He looked like a fabulous guy for envisioning how a game can be won.
He also, in 2016, was argued, and I think validly, to be the best player in the world during the peak of Faker. Very few people have ever been able to either contest or even viably say, oh, he's actually a better player than Faker.
It's the piece of trivia. That year, he won both the MVPs in the LCK.
And it was deservedly so. And I think there's actually one skill which you're talking about in terms of the the macro and the meta and stuff like that and the map play. Smeb is still the best teleporting top laner to date. If you had a fight and you needed a teleport to come into the right place in the most impactful way, Smeb, I still think, is the best teleport top laner of all time. And, the way that he played that basically got teleport nerfed over time. I mean, 2014 did that first. But I think that Smeb, he's on my shortlist too, for those reasons. I mean, in 2016, I think that being able to compete with that SKT with a mid laner like Kuro, bless his cotton socks. Smeb was a huge part of that.
It's nuts, isn't it? Yeah.
This is the soft flame episode I can see.
And also, like I said, bro, this role is so OP. We only even said the name without even talking about who Khan was. And by the way, Khan was a fucking stud. This guy was a thoroughbred.
And Noggery.
And Noggery was amazing too.
I mean, I think part of the problem. So I noticed that you guys both have TheShy at number 1, but as somebody who has a soft spot for IG, nobody has caused me more pain.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. Like, okay, sure, he got.
Think about this, Peter. I simultaneously have to hold in my mind that Rookie is the best player ever, but then I also have to say that the best top player ever was there, even though that was the bomb fucking hitting him in about a third of the games. You know, so.
And there's also some really funny results from him, where it's like and it's also just like, well, TheShy also, entered game 1 of play-ins last year, but was also one of the big reasons that was there. But also, like, Worlds 23, he decked Bin in a best of 5. Bin in 2023.
Because he was bad in the final, people forget that Semi was an epic fucking top lane.
Yeah, but he was also
really
given
good.
blind pick in 3 games versus Peak Zeus at that point. Another player we can mention on the shortlist too, Zeus, actually. We'll see where he goes, right? But I think that, like TheShy sadly getting counterpicked in all 3 games of finals, that I actually blame that on coach. Because I called it into the finals, basically just like, give Shy counterpick, see what happens. They never did it, and we'll never find out why now.
And also, just to emphasize how crazy this top lane role is, say I did have these people in a room and we just spent all this time talking about TheShy and Smeb and fucking Bin, I would have to turn to people like Zeus and go, you didn't even do anything wrong, mate. I'm sorry, but I just don't know why you just don't get to be number 1. Like, only one person can be number 1. Like, I don't know what you did wrong. You had a pretty awesome career, but shit, there's only two spots at the top, mate. What can I do?
All right.
Win worlds off T1. And
that's true. That might actually do it narratively. True.
Yeah. So just wrapping up in terms of top 2, mine was TheShy, then Kiin, Thorin. Yours was TheShy, then Smeb, and Peter. What were your 2 again?
And then Kiin.
Bin and then Kiin. All right. Okay. Done top lane. Now we get to the one which Thorin. I can already tell you're gonna get some knives out for this. Let's talk about mid lane.
Yeah.
Let's talk about mid lane. Do you want to start with Thorin?
I'll start it off because I think I actually have the best framing for this. First of all, I'm not a spring chicken. I saw every single game of Faker's career. I'm not someone who's a hater even. If people don't know, the real joke of all is how you know who's too young in League of Legends. Until something like 2020, I was the biggest Faker glazer ever. Like, I didn't even just do videos that are like, this is the best player in the world. I had a video where I said Faker transcended esports itself. And now let me just put that in context so you know how crazy that is. I still to this day consider League of Legends not actually that great a game for skill expression because I come from Quake, Counter-Strike, and there's even StarCraft Brood War that exists. So if you don't know these games, you can do unbelievable mechanical things. So in theory, the idea that I would ever say Faker might be like the best to ever play esports is nuts because people in Quake have unbelievable skill expression. The StarCraft Brood War players were like grinding themselves to oblivion and accomplishing the great. But the problem with Faker's career is simple. This is why he's my number 2. Is a lot of it is actually more applicable now to a GOAT discussion, not a best discussion. If you want to do the GOAT discussion, well, he keeps adding trophies. He keeps having top placings. He keeps staying relevant. That's great for if you want to do a best career discussion. He pretty much wins that one hands down with anyone, doesn't he, in League of Legends? The problem I have is this. There are 2 Fakers. There is the Faker that was the era I super glazed him. Spoiler, he was right in my wheelhouse of players I like. He even, by the way, actually, I think won some worlds with some scoffed players. People will know now everyone's come round to my side. People used to hate my guts when I said Bang and Wolf weren't that great, even though they had like 2 worlds and a bunch of MSI. People used to think I was an idiot and go, they're the best player at their position. And I just remember thinking, just wait. Like, that will eventually you'll look back with the eye test when you weren't the person in the moment and you'll go, that guy wasn't better than Matter or Ming or Keria now or Meiko. But the difference is, Faker was the shit as an individual super carry the first, 4 or 5 years? He was unbelievably good, even on years where they didn't win. But and hence famously people know 2017 he was fucking sick of that Worlds too. The problem is the latter half, the 2020s Faker, is basically a different player. Like I always say, what's interesting about mid lane, this will get to where I'm going with my number 1 pick, is actually most mid laners go the way Faker did. Maybe they even copied his style. You notice how everyone starts in theory as the peak of their mechanics as a young player. Everyone starts as the assassin, the Fizz, the Zed, they're like, oh, Carly. It's like, oh, better watch out, bro, I'm going to 1v1 you and all that. Everyone who's great starts like that. But normally to have longevity as a mid laner, you have to eventually master being a mage player and play safe and fucking not go for every solo kill and wait for the timings with the jungle and so on. And he's the one who did that most beautifully. The second half of his career, if you want to judge him as a shot caller and a captain, it's phenomenal, isn't it? But I think most of the times at those worlds, maybe with the exception of this last one, he's relying on other people. He's relying on Zeus to be the best top player in the world. He's relying on Guma to go deathless in a series. He's relying on Keria to warp the meta. So my issue with Faker is this. if we're going on best, this isn't GOAT discussion, this is best. If we're going on best player, I don't think he's been the best player for like 8 years or something now. It's a long time. Now, he was the best player for what, 3 or 4 years? 3, 4, maybe 5? We can have that discussion. So my issue is this. People will know this is the controversial take. I think the best, not the greatest, I think the best mid laner of all time isn't Chovy, isn't Knight, it is Rookie. And the reason why it is Rookie is this.
Fucking hell,
because,
mate.
listen, buckle up. Here's why. First of all, I can always tell that people who think this is a ridiculous take have never watched the LPL. Right? You don't realise Rookie in the LPL, there's a reason why he won the most MVPs, by the way. I don't know if Knight's even caught him now. I think at one point in time, Rookie won something like 3 or 4 MVPs. I think it was at least 3. And the reason why was they actually used to properly assign the MVP award back then. They didn't do it like Koreans do, where it's the best player on the best team. They were essentially giving Rookie all LPL first place and MVP most years as a way of saying it's not your fault that your team didn't win. Like you were the shit, bro. You were the best player in the LPL. You just weren't as good as RNG in certain years. You weren't as good as EDG in certain years, but it wasn't your fault. I always tell people, you ever watch Rookie? First of all, unlike Faker, he never got the memo that you're supposed to have a second half of your career where you transition to being a safe mage player. And you just play. Rookie to this day still trying to carry every game. You can actually argue it's maybe even a flaw of his the last few years because he plays like he thinks he's still the best player in the world. But that's also why I think at his peak, which I think is, it's not even when he won in OGN, by the way, it's when he came to Korea. For my money, his peak is like 2015 to about, I'd say maybe 2021. I'll cut it off a couple of years back. I wouldn't say the last few years. I think he did have a degraded level of play, and there's a reason why he also didn't get the best spots. But he had a very solid play. Well, I don't think anyone had as much longevity as the best player at mid lane. And crucially, if you ever watch how he plays, he is also the ultimate mid laner at getting everything out of all aspects of the game. So first of all, as a laner, you could never be bored watching this guy lane. He aggressively lanes on every CS. He constantly pressures the opponent. Then also, he's an unbelievable team fighter. Like, you give him certain champions, he will just destroy the opponent so hard. And so I always thought the one thing the LPL always had going for it had crazy talent depth. And this guy, for a solid half a decade plus, was just the best player at mid lane, if not the whole league, in my opinion. So I understand why, because he only has the one Worlds, because he never got to the MSI final because of Team Liquid. I get why people hate him. And if you don't watch the LPL, by the way, it's a totally absurd take, because a lot of it's based on what he did every day of his career, not just the internationals. But yeah, you get to play a large sample size of games in the LPL, and I've seen a lot of this guy's career. I've seen it all, but I mean, essentially, a lot of this guy's career counts to my argument, in my opinion. People are welcome to think otherwise. Go for it.
Wait, is he number 1 or number 2, Thorin?
He's number 1 for me. Faker's number 2.
Faker's number 2.
That's crazy to me. I mean, like, I understand the arguments for
give me a counterpoint. Hit me with a counterpoint.
So I think there are a couple of things, right? So I think that if you're going to kind of put Rookie against other great players in the LPL, he has been trashed by Knight pretty much every time they have faced. He has an awful bogey matchup there. And I believe that in 24, Knight ended up overtaking him MVPs. That was the big thing. I think he got his third like LPL MVP there. So I think in terms of like matchups versus the greats, Knight pretty much ever since they both kind of came at heads, Knight beat him.
Well, that's,
I think one of the problems.
Listen, the reason that's a really great point, Your Honour, for you to make is I can't wait for you to tell me about Faker versus Chovy.
Yeah, well,
go ahead.
Oh, Jesus. I think one of the big problems, which kind of the problem with the evidence for Rookie is, again, it's just so much LPL, and he didn't make an international event for what the last one he made was Worlds 2019, and then he only got a single series at Worlds 25. Yes. So realistically, you are looking at 2014 to 2019 as the biggest kind of points across global competition at the highest level of play. Rookie at MSI 2019 did get the world's fastest game versus Faker in MSI 2019 as well. That was the Sonataric bot lane, and things snowballed against them there. But we didn't get to see, Rookie versus Faker in this modern era. Besides that last best of five, I'd argue actually that Faker, because there was that Orianna or Akali matchup, right, where Faker was. I mean, it was actually a very good series from Rookie on the whole. I think he was pretty good, but I think Faker was the better mid laner. So I think that ends up like holding things against him there. And I think regional competition, he has. By the way,
I'll also concede as well. That is a very fair point. Like, essentially, in this case, I'm sort of saying, well, he didn't get the chance to play it last year. But you can't obviously give people points for things they didn't do. I will say that is a good argument against it.
Whereas the thing with the Shy is that when you go have like the Shy like on Weibo in 23, like he did actually get there before Rookie, and he got to finals without Rookie there. And you know, I agree. I think that last Worlds, it is a crying shame that plans the way that it was, because I think that IG probably would have been a semi-finalist team. They probably would have been, and I think they were actually, you know, it's harsh that they had to go first best of 5 at the event opening, and they don't even get to play split stage, because I think they actually would have done very well last Worlds. But yeah, no, I mean, Rookie at peak, I mean, he is one of the very few people to win as a mid laner, both OGN and LPL as well, and particularly OGN. That's the huge fucking one, because as we were saying a little bit earlier, 2014 I think is the year where Keria was the furthest ahead any region has ever been in the world, and Rookie still won in summer 2014. That is bigger than a World, I think, arguably at some points in that year, like winning against Samsung Blue in finals. So definitely I think for that era, he has like some huge props towards him. But then the problem is, like, when you go Rookie versus Faker, is that I just look at the way that Faker changed the game to the point where I'm like, in terms of level of first to second, the way that Faker kind of compares against the rest of them is that in the early days, I mean, Rookie is one of these other people, in fairness, but Faker was the person who could play multiple styles to the highest level possible. He was the best mage player. He was the best assassin player. The thing where it fell apart was, like, he wasn't as good at utility when it came round to it. But then even then in 2015, he had stuff like the Lulu, which I think was the best Lulu mid laner of all time, which of course is a pick which has been and gone at this point. I mean, obviously it's karma compared to various other people. There's only a limited amount you can do, but he didn't have the ceiling on that. My argument for Faker over anyone, right, is just that the peak of Faker got him as a player individually nerfed more than anyone else in the entire history of League, with the way that he played his individual assassins. And even when he was nerfed, he still continued to be one of, if not the best in the world for 4 years solid, despite constant nerfs to assassins, his best ways of playing. I think very, very few players have had that, to the point where, like, I think only even someone like Chovy at peak, really, with all of the laning phase and the farming and stuff like that, has been changed in the way that mid lane extracts gold out of that role. Chovy is the only other person I think has managed to reach that kind of peak at that point. I mean, Rookie is on my shortlist. I just don't, I can't in good conscience put him at the level of Faker, who I think at rank 1 to rank 2 had the biggest differential there, but you do raise some interesting points.
I mean, for my criteria, the reason Faker's number 1 on my criteria is that I value elevating the level of your teammates, right? And we have multiple evidence of this with Faker, in that obviously here we're having quite a nuanced and in-depth discussion, right? But for roles like jungle, but you go and talk to many fans, and there are fans who will still tell you that Bengi is the best jungler of all time, or like top 2 in jungler of all time. And I think that there is no player there's no player in League of Legends history that has made his teammates more overrated than Faker. You know, you look at with respect, none of these guys are like,
that's a good angle,
Bengi, like Marin, like.
By the way, as I said before, Bang went to the LCS and was an average LCS AD carry. I'm not even hating on him when I say that. Like, he just wasn't some Viper type superstar. But by the way, when he won those 2 worlds, people would have put him at the time, if we'd done that discussion, they'd have put him in the GOAT conversation. You're right, Peter. He has actually made everyone look their best. Yeah,
and I mean, we have the evidence. Like, I give a lot of credit to Faker for T1 being garbage when Poby subbed in.
Sure.
And like that to me, like, means because of what happened that year, I cannot imagine anyone overtaking Faker, because to see that difference in level of performance, just like, I think it's going to be so hard. Like, even if Keria wins 10 worlds, right? Because Faker retires at the end of this year. He's probably, you know, I'm going to find you almost never get those situations in either regular sports or in esports, where a player literally get to see what the team is like without them on it. And I think that is kind of the thing which makes it hard for me to argue against Faker, because, you know, look, if I'm giving Bin credit for winning with Angel, and I'm giving for winning with with Angel, and I'm giving other people credit for winning with, Yahoo
credit or whatever,
and things like this. Like, I have to give Faker credit for winning with Bengi, you know? Like, so that's why Faker is my number 1. The interesting question here, though, Nymaera, is who do you have as your number 2? Because to me, I think
where it gets really weird.
I think this is it's a default.
Oh, I've got one last point to make. Let me just give you one last, a bit like I did with the Smeb one. I always have my trivia angle. That's like the Yu-Gi-Oh trap card to activate.
Sure.
So I'll give you one last angle for Rookie. Right. See if you can. You guys will be able to get it pretty quick. I'll list off a list of names, and at the end, just tell me what is the common denominator. So here's the list of names. It goes Kid, Wink, Puff, Fortic. What was I just listing there?
Were they perhaps the AD carries of Rookie?
Now listen, he did have Jackie Love, and at one point he had Jackie Love twice even. But aside from Jackie Love, he had some bomb ADCs. Now, by the way, gentlemen, didn't we just do this discussion earlier? I know what I'm doing. The ADC is the king of the LPL. It's the ADC region. They all play around the fucking... In fact, I'll even throw this in there. That's also why Rookie's win at Worlds in 2018 is worth extra compared to other wins. That year, they weren't even the best team. RNG was the best team in the world when the game could be played through the bot lane. But when Riot almost turned... It's like I controlled Riot for that day. Like, give the solo lanes the power. Like that fucking meme of Ed Harris in The Truman Show everyone loves. Well, you know what? The second he gave the solo lanes the power, what do you know? Rookie and TheShy blasted everyone's booty off the fucking server, and it didn't matter who was on their team. Bowland could do whatever he wanted, mate. It didn't matter. He was just on the back of the bus, and they were driving like speed or something, mate. So all I'll say is, he has everyone who tells me Nymaera that thing. It's just cope. You just say that everyone's into him. That list of ADCs I just listed there was criminal. That was outrageous. Some of those people only got professional jobs because Rookie just let them motherfucking play.
It's one of the things I hold hardest against Rookie is that he hasn't chosen good rosters.
Yes.
No,
like
it's
so
on loyalty.
It is.
What, you sure, but like you have to hold it against some players.
No, I know what you mean.
On EuroLeague, when I talk with Rich and Keria, we call it the Larson problem because holy fuck, Larson stuck by Rogue way too long in his career. I think it did, which is a problem because I think he could have been way better within Europe.
By the way, I'll always say that is a valid point. Realistically, my issue isn't with people who don't rate Rookie. It's that I wish I could speak to Rookie and go, why didn't you just leave in like 2022 or something? Why didn't you just go to a team that was
Rookie's agent?
That was fully made, and then you could have just won from day one, couldn't you? Instead, I agree. You were doing some like Steven Gerrard shit, like I'll just stay here and hopefully they get better teammates. Like that fucking sucks. I'm with you. That is whack.
Yeah. Okay, so my number 2 isn't Rookie, though. It is actually Chovy. Chovy is actually my number 2, and I think it's someone that we have to come around to the conversation for. You can't do this based on world titles and performance at Worlds, obviously, which is the big thing, which kind of gatekeeps him from being in number 1 contention even anytime soon, right? He probably has to get multiple Worlds to make up for the one which for the ones which he's fallen away from it. But I think if you look at particularly MSI 2024 and then obviously 2025 as well, I don't think there's been a player as far ahead of their role in the modern era as MSI 24. I actually find it incomprehensible the stuff which Chovy was doing, because if you're watching mid lane back in 2014 to 2020, even like a huge length of time, the level which Chovy was ahead of role I just didn't think was possible from mid lane, even though we just seen players like Rookie or Durnby or even someone like Scout I'd seen doing some mega stuff, or Knight, right? The way that Chovy consistently made himself a game-ending threat was just beyond what I thought mid lane was capable of. And I thought that, Knight was the second best mid laner in MSI 2024, and he still looked just a distant second best.
He did.
I've never seen a gap in the most elite role in League of Legends on average across history be that much of a difference. And the fact that Chovy could do this across regular seasons, across MSIs, the one thing was just Worlds, right? But if you look on average from... maybe 2023 is where things were not going as well for him, right? Because he got beaten by Yagao at a best of 5 in MSI 23. But like 24, 25, 2 years. I mean, even before that, right? Chovy has been in the conversation of, oh my god, how can he do this from years before that? I think what puts Chovy ahead is again that kind of differential between number 1 and number 2 for me, which is something which Peter's mentioned before, and I mentioned this for Faker as well. And I haven't mentioned this as much for the other roles. I just think it's so blatant in these periods of time that Chovy has to be at least on your shortlist. He is probably the person on this list with like the least achievements compared to their contemporaries in terms of the international, world success. Really, is a double MSI winner. But yeah, Chovy has to be on my shortlist, and he is my number 2.
I will say that there is one other person. So we mentioned Durnby, Rookie. Scout, I think, is a good call out.
Also on my shortlist. Yeah. 23 Scout was huge, but before that, longevity really plays into it.
I mean, I have Durnby really high as peak. I have Xiaohu really high. I think like Xiaohu's in the conversation, but the one person that I think deserves to be on the short list and like actually under serious consideration here when we're talking about a top 2 is Caps. Because like, let me put it this way, Caps is the person who has given...
How dare any of you laugh at me with my Rookie call? Keep going, Peter.
No. Who's given a region hope for like a decade?
Okay.
I'm gonna be really clear on this, right? Like,
so hope is a criteria now.
Right, Chuck Maple on there as well. Maple joins in, late contender. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm going to say about Caps, right? If we value Worlds really highly, right?
Sure.
When we're comparing Chovy versus Caps.
Yeah.
But Chovy versus Faker, right? But Caps has better records at Worlds than Knight and Chovy, I believe. He has 2 finals,
True.
right?
Yeah. we're going off
Knight
peak,
has
his highest position, yeah.
Lost in final.
Yep.
Lost 3-2
One time.
to Faker in.
Yep.
Like, okay, so he has 2 Worlds finals. He got smoked in both of them, let's be fair. Still have nightmares about that first game, giving Pike into Nautilus, I think.
Yep.
I think they played 2019, which kind of like ruined G2's Golden War. Golden Road. Like that 2019 G2 almost got the Golden Road that season. Like, and Caps is a major part, right? So I think if we're talking in terms of peak, I think this is a guy that like deserves acknowledgement. I think the fact that he's winning from Europe is a massive mark in his favor. And I think that every win that a European team has is worth more than, for judging people in GOAT status, is worth more than like a LCK win or an LPL win. Right? Obviously, LPL wins are valuable. Like every time you win Worlds from LPL or every time you win Worlds for LCK, is valuable. But let's say if Caps wins another MSI, or because they came pretty close at first stand, then I think then you can really have that discussion, right?
Yeah, but my problem with this is just because we bring it around to like the AD, what we started with the AD carry thing in terms of like how many times and how often has Caps been the best undisputed mid in the world? I think it's maybe once. And I think that you compare that to Knight, who I think was best. I think he was the best player at Worlds 24. I think that he's been best player in the world in MSI 23.
You could argue he is right now.
He's beyond it. Yeah, obviously Knight is right now. I think Chovy has way more times being the best mid in the world than Caps has as well. Like if you're talking about greatest and in terms of the ephemerals, I'm sure you can make an argument for Caps for doing what he's done with the resources of a European team practice situation which he's in without being in the systems of the Koreans. But I think in terms of this debate, I just can't put him. I can't put him on the short. I put Showmaker on the shortlist before him.
Yeah, but look, I can't put Caps as my number 2, right? Because I don't think there's been a Worlds or like an international tournament where he has warped the meta, right? Like in the way that Odoamne has warped it.
Well, I was like 2019, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, how much was like that's a bit on G2 as well, right? It's a little bit on perks.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you're arguing against yourself.
No, but that is my argument against Caps, right?
Okay, all right.
The reason why I can't, why I have Caps at kind of a level of Odoamne, despite the fact that his longevity is like 5 times as long as Odoamne, right? Is because Odoamne has that individual.
You're wilding with this take, mate. We didn't even put fucking BDD on this list, and you're putting Caps on. Like, get out. Listen, homie. People are going to, sadly, everyone's going to laugh at my rookie take. Peter's Caps one is like if I actually did take that Froggen was the best player in 2012 and put him on this fucking list. I didn't, though, you notice. I had the respect not to do that, gentlemen.
Caps is in my top 5.
Okay. Who is your number 2? Who's your number 2?
Yeah, my number 2 is Chovy, but I kind of...
Okay, thank God some
after all that.
No, but I really want Knight. I really want to put Knight there, like... But, no, I mean...
By the way...
put it this way, if Knight wins Worlds, and if they get, like, MSI and Worlds, I think Knight actually is in with a really good shot, because he did what Chovy couldn't win that Worlds.
And I'll preempt the last conversation here, which is who overall is your second best player of all time, because everyone else is going to say Faker, obviously, right? I'll preempt that also by saying the same criteria I just gave for rookie, I do also think on exactly that criteria, one day I'm going to end up saying Chovy is the best player ever in League of Legends, because for the same thing, all those years where if you count, here's the real problem. People always do this thing where they take the statement everyone could agree on, which is Worlds is the most important tournament. They take that and they go, yeah, I agree. But what they heard was only Worlds counts, which is a very different statement, you'll notice. So I have the same problem in traditional sports. In traditional sports, there are players who maybe didn't actually in team games win the championship, but the majority of your career isn't the playoffs and isn't the final. The final, you might play like 5-10 finals in your whole career. Most of your career, day to day, it's just an everyday regular season game. And for me, those still count. They're the least important, but they also make up the largest volume of your career. So by the same logic I currently have rookie, I actually think if we did this in 3 years, I'll probably have Chovy as my number 1 in every sense.
Yeah.
I also think his regular season play is mind-blowing.
And because he actually beat the number 1 and number 2 players on Peter and Mai's list in a single event, Yagao has to be in the shortlist too, beating a best of 5 at MSI 2023. Yagao's straight on the shortlist.
Exactly.
Like, the one person that makes me really sad that I can't really justify is like Xiaohu. Like Xiaohu, one day let's do our underrated players of all time, and then I can go
and here's the thing: for someone like Xiaohu, it also gets a lot sexier if you make it largely about things like what about intangibles and what about about all day. Yeah, that stuff is a way bigger case. All right, here's the last topic then is like, forget roles. Assuming everyone who isn't Thorin has number 1 Faker, who is number 2? Forget roles. Who was the number 2 player of all time? Second best player ever. Who is it, Nymaera?
I did have to, like, it was really hard for me to pick this. I thought, like, I can't quite pick TheShy. I can't pick Canyon. I just don't think he's had longevity. By process of elimination, I got it down to Deft. I got it down to Deft as number 2, which I think is obviously, it's fantastic that it came down to that story of Worlds 22 as well. For all the reasons you mentioned before, I think Deft, like, succeeding in so many different facets of what is often quite a typecast role, being able to win multiple international events over such a long career, but succeeding in the 2 best regions in the world. Deft is my number 2 for the reasons we discussed in his individual section.
I have Keria for gap between first and second, basically. That's it.
Right, since I already did the mid lane thing, I won't do that. I was actually going to troll. I thought we were going to lead with second best of all time. So the joke is, what I was going to do, gentlemen, is I would let you go first, and then I was going to pretend that it isn't even weird that I have Faker as the second best of all time. So I was going to say, I actually have a guy called Faker. He was an amazing player. He was clutch. And I was going to pretend like I was making the case for him. Well, we've already done that, so it's all good. So I will just say this. Obviously, I have Faker as my number 2. Funnily enough, though, despite the fact that 1 and 2, like he doesn't even have Lukinis, obviously, I also do think I have Deft as my number 3. I actually, for the longest time, until recently, I always used to think, for me, that's why the Uzi conversation was like a dated take. To me, it was always Faker and Deft were the 2 greatest ever. Yeah. Especially, they had in all peaks, longevity, they could do it all in every region, they won everything. Like, to me, they're easy people to put straight in the top of the list. Who is your number 2, Peter?
Keria.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yes, for the gap. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've got one quick question before we leave, though, which is this. Right. A classic thing people have often made the point. I always thought was a very valid point Dom made in 2023 when T1 was living and dying off Keria. His point he always made was this, which is, isn't it hard to call a support player the best player, though? Because of the
it is, because well, I mean, for a lot of history, yes, although I think in modern era, most teams that win events have the best support.
That's true.
I think that actually, I think it's a hugely important role. Yes. I think that, like I said with BLG, I think there's actually a world where On can make it after a couple more years of, like, if he has like a really good year this year and whatever, On can actually make it somewhere onto that list, right? But BLG only succeed when On is playing well, and T1, when they win, it's probably because Keria is the best support in the role too. Very rarely do you have a team win when they don't have the best support. You need a support to like manage your structure. So actually, compared to the earlier years of League, yeah, for sure. But I think nowadays, like, if you don't have a good support, you can't even compete at top level.
And I mean, by the same token, I think like you can win with a 9 out of 10 AD carry, 8 out of 10 AD carry. I don't think you need, like, the way League has developed, I don't think
Gala.
you need the best AD carry in the world. Yeah.
It's true, but I just like to say it to hurt people's feelings. I am still who I am.
I'm not dining that response. I'm not rising to the occasion.
Listen, did win MSI twice. Fair enough, he did. Carried, whatever. Kaisi, whatever. Anyway, right, here's the thing. I actually have some amazing news to announce, which is we actually even have a sponsor. That's right, we've come so far in the 3rd episode, and it is Prize Picks. Now, since Prize Picks is actually an official daily fantasy partner of the NBA, they're actually running a competition now where it's called the Do It Live 2026 NBA Finals Sweepstakes. You pick live squares during the NBA playoffs, which is ongoing now, and you could win a trip for 2 to the NBA Finals. To enter, just make a $5 lineup with at least one live NBA player pick during any part of the 2026 NBA playoffs. A live player pick is just a pick that you make after the game is already in progress. Because if people don't know, one of the features is you can also do things while it's live. Like, another one is they have like an early cash out feature where actually if the player you pick is doing really well, you can also cash out before the game even ends. You can stack, so if you have a favourite player, you don't have to just pick him for points or 3-pointers or rebounds. If you have a player like Wembyana, who's a player currently playing for the Spurs, you can also pick him for all those categories and make that yours. It's easy. You just pick between 2 and 6 stats projections. All you have to pick is more or less, like they'll say, like, this player will make 4 3-pointers. You just decide, will he make more? Will he make less? It's easy. And then also you can copy yours. You can copy successful people's lineups and try and tail what they're doing. So go and download the Prize Picks app today and use code LEAGUESHOW, all one word, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LEAGUESHOW to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, a preferred partner of the NBA. Okay, so we will now move to the second topic here, gentlemen.
Should we just? I think it might be more interesting if we go in depth on the second topic and maybe leave the third topic.
All right, we can bump the next one till last week. Yeah. We won't say what it is, but yes.
Dude, we started trying to go with 5 topics, we're down to 3.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, but you did. To be fair, you did also for your first topic here pick what might be the longest discussion possible. For like top lane, we had like 6 names or something. I don't like it.
That's 5 topics, no? We literally
exactly.
This is our 6th.
Yeah, you've done it. You've sold it the wrong way, Nymaera. We've actually secretly done 5 topics already. We're going to add 2 more.
I'm so used to losing my job and spots on podcasts. I thought I really needed ownership of this one podcast I'm on.
Because here it's actually my topic this week, ladies and gentlemen. And even though part of me, luckily, I haven't got anything I have to do now soon, boys. So it's okay. Part of me's scared to even start this topic because this topic itself could be like another 1.5 hours. But it's just a brilliant topic. If you're someone who's followed the game for a long time and done content like we all have, I think this is actually just an excellent, really fun topic. So my topic is: who is the biggest wasted talent from the West in League of Legends? So we can go any role, any area you could pick, basically. So I think this one's also really fun because obviously we can get very idiosyncratic, can't we? So who's a name coming straight off the top of the head? Who are we going to put forwards?
Danny.
Yeah, I'm literally going to say
straight out the gate. I'm not even easing him into it. Okay, Jesus. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No foreplay, nothing. Okay.
No, I for various reasons I cannot talk about this.
Sure.
Oh gosh.
But I literally when Thorin asked this question, I'm going to say one word and then I'm going to shut up.
All right.
Next,
well then, let's have Nymaera's version. You give your version of it then, Nymaera. What would you say about Danny?
I think particularly in like for a long time, there haven't been that many talents coming out of the West which really think can make a difference and actually be someone that, you don't import for that role. Actually, this is someone that you stick with them, especially so early into their career. And, I'm not someone that's followed as much of NA over the years. I followed it a lot in the early years. Then after a while, I thought, well, realistically, is there much achievement going on here? That the great TSM and the TL teams have failed over time. And then this EG team came out of nowhere, and we had someone like Jojo, who was absolutely blowing just people out of lane insane from him. But then alongside him was this kid called Danny. And Danny was someone you could actually rely on to be a hyper carry at the highest levels in a way that, just Western AD carries in general hadn't been a thing, particularly but for NA. They hadn't had someone, I think, to perform at that level consistently for a while. I suppose you had some people who almost made it and then like kind of for one reason or another hadn't quite made it. Some like, Tactical was all right for a while, but obviously had his great flaws as well. But we were a long time removed from people like, Doublelift, Sneaky, and a couple of the other AD carries that were, I think, world renowned. I think Danny was actually on the cusp of being world renowned for a while. And obviously due to a lot of the mishandling of his mental health from within the organization, which I still think deserves to be talked about an awful lot because of whatever the hell went on in the organization. Now, defunct, not within League of Legends, right? But we lost an AD carry that could actually compete on a international stage, admirably, I thought, but was cut short through to... It's not even because of contract reasons or visa reasons or something like that, due to mismanagement and an org standpoint of a young person's mental health, which to me, that is just such an utter failure of a system. And obviously, for reasons like that, obviously, Peter can't talk about that. We can understand that. But I mean, yeah.
I've thought about how to answer this question. Okay, so I've got to be... Let me think very carefully about what I'm going to say.
Well, why don't you talk about the positives of Danny? Talk about the positives of Danny.
I'm going to talk about... I'll talk about Danny. So I'll say that the thing to understand about Danny is that he is a player who was literally playing League of Legends from the age of 6 years old. To find somebody who literally grew up inside League of Legends, literally he just fundamentally understood things about the game that he didn't he just they were obvious, right? They're things that you need to coach somebody. Okay. But with Danny, I would say that you just didn't need to. He just understood, right? Okay. There's many examples, even in terms of how the mindset of how other people in the game are thinking. There's a very famous clip of him where he gets a delayed pentakill on Tristana, right? And people are like, "Oh my god, he played so well in this pentakill," but they miss a moment at the end where he's being chased. So he's managed to save the game. He's being chased 1 versus 2, and then 2 people chase him away, and then he runs into a bush. And I think it's Someday and Abadage who are chasing him, right? And then he blue trinkets the bush that he's standing in on top of himself, so that the other players are like, he's gone away. So then they face checks him, and like everyone is like, oh my god, like what's he doing, right? But he doesn't think that. Why would you ever blue trinket on top of somebody in the bush? And I would say that with Danny, like his instincts for the game were like better than any player that I've ever coached. And I think that's simply because when you have literally just played League of Legends for your entire life, that's all you think about. Now, he had issues with his laning phase, right, which he was gradually improving on over time. And I would say that people will say, oh, but what about his international performance? And I would say the one international tournament that he got to play in was on a time where there was enforced ping, because so the entire tournament was forced to be played on enforced ping.
Yes.
The ping, it turned out that the teams that were based in Korea had double the ping that they were supposed to have.
Right.
And the ping was unstable in multiple games, right? And if you are somebody who relies on your instincts, that makes the game almost impossible to play. And despite that, he still had a good performance on what is basically something which is impossible for, you have like some players who are instinct players and some players who are thinking players, right?
Yeah.
And Danny was very, very much an instinct player, and to be forced to play on that kind of unstable ping situation where the ping, like he was smurfing in solo queue, like he was really, really high. He was like the highest Western player in solo queue at that MSI because the ping was stable. But then. Yeah.
Put it this way, Peter, I think an argument that will be in favour of what you're saying now is one of the reasons I've told everyone that that you don't want us to ever go away from studio play are all these EWC online qualifiers now. Every region is having the most alien upsets of all time because the difference between playing on 8 ping in a LAN server and 30 to 40 online is a big deal in League of Legends. That's not some minor issue. I think there was even a quote where Faker once went to America and was like, how can you do the skill shots on 40 ping? And obviously every American's like, are you for real? Like, I'm on 70 ping, but that was like, that's how big the difference is. Yeah, it's big.
Yeah. And I think that's the best way to leave it for Danny. I would say that there are things about Danny that I don't, maybe in the future you could replicate, there's people but because of his age and the fact that he was literally playing from season 1 at the age of like 5 or 6 or something, right? He had the King Rammus skin, the Bowser skin that you had if you played on the start, right? And that it's not possible to be younger, you have to be, he was like the perfect age to be playing, right from the start, right? So I think having that was basically an impossibility. And I think that, I think that's kind of all I can.
Put it this way, on the Danny one, I'll just say this briefly. He definitely qualifies for this because obviously his career was cut criminally short. Like, it should have been we should be playing now. He should actually now have had like a long career where we could talk about all the years he's been here. But here's the reason why I'll even say it's actually a fair shout. Because even the thing that you pointed out there at the end, Peter, which people are going to bring up as the ultimate knock against him. Think about it, right? If you're an ADC, most people for ADCs want you to be an ego lane king and smash the game early and not need anyone's help, etc. I'll just say this. One, Peter quite literally at the beginning enforced that as a way to help adjust him to the team. That wasn't like he came in like, I can only play weak side or whatever. And then secondly, I'll just throw this out there. If you know the history of League of Legends, bro, some of the best ADCs ever, people like Deft and Nymaera had periods where the jungler had to help them get out of lane. They didn't just lane their way out of it and join. They had to sometimes be coached through that period so then they could shine. And I agree with what you guys are saying, which is this. Even in his brief time as a player who was essentially a rookie most of his career, this is a guy where, especially for like late game team fighting, he had elements that were way too polished for a rookie in that sense. Like, normally, it's the other way around. The guys who smashed it, like my boy Upset, took a long time till you could rely on him in every team fight. Like, he would be the guy who'd win the laning phase, and in the mid game he'd be good, but maybe he's not as good in the big team fight. Danny came out the womb polished in a team fight. It was unbelievable. It's not just because he played stupid shit in that era. Some of those pentakills were just straight fire, bro. His position was unbelievable. Like, they're really good clips if you go back and watch them. Yeah. I will say, though, I do have a suspicion, at least for my side. Most of the other names, that one's one where there was extracurricular shit. There was other circumstances held that person back. Most of the people on my list, gentlemen, their biggest problem was they were so good, they also destroyed themselves. Spoiler, I'll tell you 2 names that are on my list. I'll throw them out right now. 2 of my picks for this, from the West, remember, have got to be my boy Forgiven. Listen, I've always told people this.
Anyone who had a bingo card can take that off now. Of course. Okay.
I was even someone who, look, sadly, because of who Forgiven is, this will also help explain who he is. I used to describe him as a friend. Then I think he just did like a tweet or something like, he was never even really a friend of mine. It's like, that explains who this guy is to a T. He was someone I was like internet friends with, an acquaintance who I'd talk with before the matches and during his... And all I'll tell you is this. I even at one point in time had to do my own mini intervention where I basically took the guy aside and told him, listen, I know they're phrasing it in a really fucked up way, but they're sort of right. You are fucked up, bro. Because I've always told people this story. It was fine in the early days of his career when he was in Copenhagen Wolves and he was on these scuffed rosters. Then he was like the 1v9 player who had not very good teammates and he would have to be amazing. And he was having to compete against people like Reckless when they had like the super teams and they had the best players ever. I used to tell him, I'm with you on all your grievances then. But I've told this story before. He was once trying to take me aside when he was in H2K, which remember was like, if not the best, the second best roster in the whole EULCS at the time. He was trying to tell me how all of these players were shit. At the time, peak Jankos, peak Odoamne, he had Vander, and I used to go, bro, if these players are, I've said this to Nemesis as well, if these players aren't good enough for you, spoil it, there are no players better than this. You just think the other guy's better because he won the championship. Like, if you don't think Jankos is good enough, what Western jungler am I giving you that's going to be good enough for you? So, with all that said, that is a massive thing that stopped this guy being good. But I'll tell you what, if someone had severed his vocal cords and he could only play the game as a mute in this case, his hands were
you mean like in that really awful Wolverine Origins movie with Deadpool with this?
Yeah, where Deadpool was Ryan Reynolds but didn't get to talk. Yeah. Genius idea for casting, by the way. Who thought that up? I know. But no, basically, put it this way, it is no exaggeration. All the stories you ever heard about Forgiven's mechanics and that laning style are real. Like, he was the Western Uzi Eye. He would try to win the game from minute one of the lane with any matchup. He really did do insane shit. This is real. Like, when I would tell him, why aren't you playing Callista? Uzi Eye gets pentakills on it. He'd go, it's going to be nerfed soon, so what's the point? It's like, that doesn't even make sense to say. And then famously, at the time when Sivir used to win every fucking bot lane game, I would be like, why not just play it and win? He'd go, this is, guys, on the one hand, I fuck with this so heavy. On the other hand, it's whack. On an anime level, this is dope. He would go, but if I win on Sivir, did I really win? Isn't the game just broken? Which again, in an anime, guys, I'd be loving this, like, look, it wouldn't be main character to be like anti-hero energy. I'd be loving that anti-hero energy. That's amazing. Problem is, if you want to just win some games,
Forgiven is the Vegeta of League of Legends confirmed.
He really is, unfortunately. But that's sadly what held him back. Is he also all these like things that made him super interesting were also actually like criminal defects to have. If you want to be a good teammate, if you want to get on good team, if you want to stay on good teams as well.
Things,
but pretty sweet. As I say, the stories are real. Like behind the scenes as well, I can tell you, he has done things like there was once an IEM where he got to in private scrim against Wei Zhao and he did beat him in lane. These things aren't jokes. Like, and I've heard stories of boot camps where he was smashing the best Koreans and even they were going, wow, this guy's fucking good. Like, these are real things. So even though people think it's just like some fucking, I'm in love with this guy, there's a reason why he was just phenomenally talented. But it was a race. It was a photo finish race between his flaws as a character and his insane talent level, as often is the case, right?
I mean, I think that you know, for the newer fans that don't know the history of Forgiven, let's put it this way: H2K, the year that they made semi-finals at Worlds, they literally were not speaking in scrims, or they had to like sit in different rooms.
They stopped scrims. Yeah.
When Forgiven came back, the premise was they all stayed in the team house. Forgiven had to live with Rich's Wrath, in his apartment, and then there's even a story Rich told in the Reflection I did, which is amazing because Rich will just tell these stories. There's a story where at one point Forgiven on like TeamSpeak or something is trying to give them all a big lecture, and they'd all like left the room or something, and he was just talking to himself in a room like. And then another thing, when you're doing that. But that tells you how long this fucker was running for. They didn't even notice no one was in the room listening to him.
God. Yeah, I don't know exactly how much has been said publicly. So, like, that team was a mess. That team was a mess. Like, and basically, yeah, they bombed out in week 1 of 2016 Worlds or whatever, or whenever it was, and then week 2 they ended up going like 4-0 with the tiebreaker to make it into knockout stage, and that was when they'd stopped scrimming because they played better without scrims because the chemistry just.
And by the way, someone in this call was coaching in that group.
Oh, who could that be?
In fact, sadly, because Forgiven and H2K beat them, no one even remembers that Peter Dodd actually got Brazil to beat motherfucking China, they actually beat them for real. That happened. EDG did lose.
Yeah,
it did happen.
Still lost twice to HQ though. Like that's like
that's a bummer. We don't talk about that part, but we just say with the good part, of course. And as a last detail, just to show you how absurdly talented this guy was, people will probably say, "But Thorin, remember the last time when he came back with Schalke?" There's a context that people miss to that, which is people will forget this. One of the cool things about being in the scene is, I mean, now you don't need to remain publishers the fucking scrim records, but you can go and ask people what's going on. The story goes, before that split, when Forg1ven did the comeback, actually they were winning loads of the scrims, supposedly. Everyone actually said they were like a top 3 team and they were looking really good, even though that team famously lost every game and then he got benched and then that was the end of his career. So that it's not, put it this way, whenever you hear the stories, they're not overhyped. He really was phenomenally talented. It's just he also was equally just as much of a ridiculous human being that essentially, he's one of those players that I always used to say, mate, I once told him this, I said, I knew someone like you. He was called Nymaera, but he at least chose a 1v1 game, bro. You chose the team game, and you even play the role ADC that needs the other teammates' help. At least play mid lane or something, motherfucker. You're going to be this egotistical. You actually need to convince your teammates to give you resources and peel for you. You can't just tell them you're an idiot for not peeling for it. He's not going to do it next time either. So sadly, he will always be living rent free as one of the greatest wasted talents of all time, boys. Again, as I said, never made an LEC final even. Won fuck all.
All right, so I think Thorin and I have chucked one in there. You got one, Peter?
I've got 4. Because I had different categories of this because I thought about it.
Okay.
Go on then.
I'll do like the ones I can summarize in like 2 minutes first. So first one I have is Copy. Copy I think is for people who don't know, he was a really talented up and coming mid laner, NA mid laner. Basically,
yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and he was on Cloud9, basically sat. There are some things which, let's say that the philosophy that Cloud9 had towards Academy, I haven't always admired, and I think that basically this guy was under an absurd buyout to the point where he just retired, right? He never got his chance because this was a time when people were just hiring any Korean that they possibly could. I'm not saying that NA's changed, but this guy, I don't think he quite had JoJo levels of potential, but this guy had he was really good. He was definitely good enough to play LCS and definitely good enough to go to Worlds at a time when Bjergsen and Jensen were the undisputed top 2. This guy was very close, if not at that level. But he was just never allowed because he was never promoted on Cloud9 because they had Jensen and never released to somebody else because why would you sell a really top talent to a rival, right? So to me, he's the biggest what if. Well, not the second biggest what if in history, but he never even got the chance to play. Okay. Second one, minor region, which for the Brazilian people that read this, I think there's basically a player called Jockster, who in 2016 was the year that INTZ were at Worlds. So sure, we beat EDG on stage, but scrims were absurdly good for that team. That team was incredibly good in scrims. But basically Jockster had opportunity. Well, he basically had opportunities to go to the West. To go to Europe or to go to NA. But unfortunately, how should I put this? Agreements were never possible to be made. And I think that if this guy had gone,
maybe he couldn't travel. I'm going to guess.
Yeah, I mean, if he'd gone to EU LCS or he'd gone to NA LCS, he would have. Right. People would have seen his really, really high level. Levi in that category, if he'd been able to speak English better, maybe he would have. Maybe going to NA was the wrong decision for him versus going to another. Okay, so those are just very simple things that I can. If you don't know who Levi is or you don't know who Jockster is, it's not that interesting. But I just mentioned those things. Okay, so I'm going to go with one wasted talent, and then I'll do my second one afterwards at the end. But basically, the one I'm going to say is biggest waste of talent from the West. I'm going to say is Odoamne, and Odo won a title, right? He's probably,
by the way, Peter is the most loyal motherfucker. He's picking all his players, but whatever. Go off, King. Go on.
But I'm going to say Odoamne because Odoamne has been consistently. He's consistently top 30 in solo queue. He's consistently the highest top laner in solo queue for a decade. For
sure,
right? And he spent his entire career playing weak side.
Yep.
And honestly, if Odo was had the personality of Bin, I think that he could have achieved a lot more. I think if Odo that there is a world where Wonder doesn't go to G2 in 2019 and Odo goes instead. There was the pool party. Let's say the pool party doesn't happen, or like Wonder's car breaks down on the way to the pool party, right? And Odo is picked for G2. I think that would have been a very, very interesting situation. I'm really glad that Odo won his title in the end, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is, for me, that this guy is going to be recognized as, obviously he's one of the best top laners ever that's played in Europe, but he's recognized as being the weak side king because he would go 20 CS down on Maokai into Gnar instead of 40 CS, right?
Yes.
Whereas if he could have just picked the Gnar like Wonder, and I got to see this in scrims a lot, where he would just be the strong side top laner and play the strong side, but basically was quite averse to doing it on stage because he wanted the team. He felt that sacrificing was the best way for the team to win. But maybe if this guy had just had the mentality of Alfari or something like this, he could have been like, we could be talking about him in the same way that we talk about Caps on the international level, right? I'm not saying that he's as good as Caps, right? But what I'm saying is that he never gave himself the chance to be as good as Caps, right? Because he never put. So for me, that is that. I think Odo, despite the successful career he had, could have been so much better.
And by the way, to what you're saying, hence why people call him such a great teammate, though. The reason he was perma weak side, bro, is think about he played with Forg1ven, Upset, and Sama. Like he understood that's the easier way to play the game. Yeah,
but I think like his laning phase was literally like Alfari level. But the difference is that when he had his freeze, he would hold the freeze, say the jungler's going to come top to break it. Whereas if Alfari had that freeze, Alfari would just be like, reinforce my freeze. That's the difference in the mentality, right? So I put Odo, and then I'll come to Mike.
And also, don't you think as well that people misunderstand a detail, right? I think we have. This is why when we use like quick macro terms, they get lost when they get over applied. Whenever we have a top laner who plays weak side, we always say that thing like lose gracefully, like get min max what you can. There's a big difference between someone who's the weak side because that's all they can do, and they just don't lose as hard as they want, right? That's essentially what at times they want Thorin to do in T1, for example. The difference is Odoamne. I agree with Peter. He was masterful in how he laned with no mechanic, with no resources, like with no jungle ganks, no help, no chance of a jungle gank. Like he would actually he'd do that shit where sometimes he'd be like 5 CS up when he should be like 20 CS down. Like, I agree, he was mega at that.
He was one of the best attritional top laners ever. So when you used to play around like Maokai passive and Maokai like short trades and then turn that into a kill, one of the best ever to do that, especially when you put that in the context of the West. I'm not sure I could call it the biggest waste of potential. I can understand the angle, but he at least did have his chance to shine on rosters, which I think for me disqualifies him a bit because like we still saw him on teams where should have or did succeed to the level which I thought were fine. I do understand though, Odoamne is one of the best top laners that our region's ever produced, and perhaps he could have been utilized better.
All right, do you want to? Should I do my second name and then we can do yours, Peter?
I'll quickly finish. Right? I think that the problem with Odo though is that so for me he's a waste of talent because EU has so few like genuinely world class players in recent years, and like whenever I see a player that was elite without really being acknowledged as world class, to me that's a massive waste because of how rare that you have people who can get to that next level. And
can I chuck one in? Actually,
go for it.
That's all right. Because there's one which, like, this one, it's technically not a waste, but I still think it should count. I actually think because of visa issues for Russian players, I think you can take your pick of a lot of people on the Moscow 5 Gambit rosters, and I would personally say Diamond Prox, because he was still playing in Season 5, then the visa issues hit. But actually, Diamond should have been on other world-class rosters. He was still innovating right up until his end of his time in the ULCS. He's actually, by the way, folks, still playing now. He is still playing like tier 2, just occasion where he can find himself a team. He's always had the willing. He's always had the ability to do that. The reason why it's like, again, kind of borderline, because, in the same way I was talking about Odoamne, he was on great rosters. Diamond Prox is still recognized as one of the greatest players of all time.
Yeah, but I'll give you a point that'll add to what you're saying here. I can also tell you as well, when I interviewed him in 2012, it was purely through a translator. When I interviewed him in like 2015, it wasn't through a translator, but his English was got. When I interviewed him in like, I don't know, 2019, something, he had totally fluent English. So I'll tell you another thing, Nymaera. He could have just played in any of the international teams too. He wouldn't have had to stay with Russians. Yeah, so he also certainly could have had a very long LEC career. I agree with you in that regard.
And I think And I think, yeah, which is why I think like he actually should be on the list there somewhere, just because it's so rare to have someone with that kind of mind.
Well, it's a bit like the Danny thing. It wasn't his choice, but he just got taken out by other circumstances. Like, go on.
Yeah, we'll go on to something else now, because that one's...
All right, I'll give you the other one. The other one is another bingo card. Once you get ready, you've probably made bingo from this episode. Who else is Thorin going to pick for biggest wasted talent? Of course, it's my boy Selfmade. Mate, this guy is he's up there with Forgiven. The stories are almost as bad. Like, first of all, it's the exact same story in both regards. It goes like this. If you ever let this guy get on his champion, on his pick, in his meta, or you play him in a scrim, he's unplayable. Like, people would literally say, like, this guy's mechanics, again, for a role that isn't even the pure mechanics role, mind-blowing. Like, so, I mean, people saw the brief taste of it in that top esports series they almost won at the 2020 Worlds. People forget this. Yeah, the bot lane was good. He was fucking smashing Karsa, bro. He was actually going crazy on that one. He was like the Graves carry era. Oh, he was so fucking good. But a bit like Forgiven, one of the most absurd examples of where just being able to talk can ruin your whole fucking career. Like, this is a guy, again, who could just disagree with every fucking teammate, every coach. It's just a strange guy. Like, I've never understood. But the difference is, unlike Forgiven, I wasn't friends with this person, so I couldn't sort of get the behind the scenes of it. He's one of those people that, like, I put it this way, a lot of his teammates were also baffled by him. They had they didn't get why you could be that good, but you also could be sort of your own worst enemy. It's always baffling, you know.
Yeah, I wish I knew how much of this was public, but basically, like, Mad Lions, Splice and Mad Lions joined, right? So the stories that you heard from people that worked on Mad Lions about this guy, because he won EU Masters with the Crowny Nemesis.
That was a crazy roster, actually.
Yeah. Selfmade, Whirlib, and support was Falco.
Yeah.
But yeah, the stories that basically Forgiven, he's in the same category, because all of Forgiven's stories are public because they've all been talked about mainly by,
and they were like 10 years ago.
Yeah,
like 10 years ago.
I had to wait for to get to the safe point so they could say the stories. But yeah, they all came out because they're basically the best anecdote in every Reflections interview, in it. Yeah.
and I mean, basically, like Selfmade was that tier.
Yes.
Like, I mean, yeah, I'll leave it at that. He was at that tier. So yeah, it's remarkable though that he was able to still find as much success, because despite all of that, people still kept him on. You know, despite all of that. Right?
Yeah.
So that kind of showed you how great his talent was on the stage. So.
I'd even say if people didn't watch him play, you could just take a little bit of what we had on that discussion about Blabber and Razork. He also had that sense of, like, this guy can just create a gank when one doesn't exist in the first 5. He'll just make one happen, like. And so you can also see why these players, when they're in their form, they're in crazy demand because they look like the best player you've ever seen play from jungle. The problem obviously becomes when they don't get their way, or someone wants to play the shit they don't play, or even worse, if you ask them to play a different style, some of these players just won't do it.
Yeah, I think that Selfmade was one of those guys which I really respected for just, like, having the aggressive mindset in a way that other junglers in EU just didn't have. Like, he was the first guy bringing out, like, Infinity Edge Rek'Sai jungle back at the start. He was the Evelyn player when, you know, that popped off at Worlds for him. Yeah, I mean, like, he probably is deserving of that, I suppose. Yeah, I think he probably does get into that. Suppose you could talk about, you know, other players around there. There's a class of people who I think, again, because I mentioned this in regards to Rookie, right? But I also mentioned another name there in terms of Larson. I think there is a class of people who just didn't choose very good rosters. And I think Nemesis kind of basically taking himself out of contention by not taking offers because he only wanted top teams.
Yeah, that should be in the list.
Then Larson, I think there are a couple of players which, for different reasons, just didn't want to be on kind of like title competing rosters, or didn't think they could make them into them. And I somewhat understand that, but it does make you wonder, actually, if they did stick around, could they have really leveled up again? So I think Nemesis and Larson spring to mind for that, but there probably are other names.
And surely this recent LEC versus season even makes the point for you, because, bro, they weren't a pro team, they weren't in a house, they weren't practicing like real teams do, but even in that split, I'm sure it was BO1s, but he had like half the BO1s, he unironically looked better than the other mid laner, and those were the LEC mid laners. So if that's him years down the line after letting his game not be developed and staying at it, what could he really have been now? Like, the guy could be in like an awesome conversation now for European players, but sadly he only had 2 years.
Yeah, and I think with Nemesis, like, so I said that there was one more guy that I wanted to talk about, and I think it was Nemesis, because I wanted to separate two, because the first people I talked about were kind of victims of the circumstances, right? Maybe Odo, you know, but Odo could, maybe could have had more of a say, but it's not like he was doing his job badly and he went to Worlds so many times and he did win his title in the end, right? But people like Copy and Jockster and, like these people were people that were kind of victims of their circumstances. But I think Nemesis basically wasn't a victim of his circumstances. And I think Nemesis is somebody that I think is a wasted talent because I think he put himself in like the worst possible situations for himself. Okay, so firstly, he chose to be on the Mad Lions roster, like rank 1 in solo queue. I think, was it record LP? I think it was one of the highest ever LP totals that he had on the year that he went to Fnatic, right? Played with Selfmade, didn't actually look that fantastic on that Mad Lions roster because it all went through Selfmade. Selfmade and Crownie were like the two big kind of carries on that, and he would just play the supplementary role on that. When he goes to LEC, his team is defined by having Bwipo on it. Which, if you have Bwipo on your team, you are a Bwipo team, right? Like, you don't embrace who Bwipo is, right? He's going to flip it all the time, and if you don't embrace it, you're going to end in a situation like that Bjergsen Bwipo roster where he just chain dies in a side lane because they don't flip things on the other side of the map, right? So you have to play the game in that kind of way because that's how teams with him on will play. But those were the rosters he had, right? Those were the rosters which he found his most success on, and then to turn around and basically say that he refused to go into another team rather than like if Nemesis had Perk's mentality, right? He wouldn't have just said, oh, somebody pick me a team that I want, right? Because that's a very negative way of thinking about it. It's like, oh, here's an option. It's like when you go and say, where should we go for dinner tonight? Here's option A. Oh, I don't want to do this. Oh, here's option B. I don't want to do this. Here's option C. I don't want to do this, right? But instead, you can come to an org like Mickey did, for better or worse, right? And say, I built you a roster, right? Just come and sign all of us. Yeah, and he never did that, right? He always was somebody who would just kind of take. I don't want to say it's. Let me think about how I'm going to say this. It's not a very. If he had a better mentality, he didn't need to be in a situation where he's always turning down what he considers bad rosters. Right. He never came to org saying, this is what I want. Oh, yes.
Basically, he should have done, like you said, the Mickey X movie. He should have said, build a squad around what I want, and I'll join your organization. Yeah.
I
see what you mean. Well, you framed it very well. He viewed the world as a menu that's set, and he has to pick the one, whereas he didn't realize you could make your own burger in this analogy.
Yeah, right. and for, obviously we saw how good he was. Like he doesn't look like he belongs playing EU Masters.
No, of course not.
He's so far ahead.
He was gapping everyone, even in EU Masters.
He was gapping everyone, and then he went to LEC and he was gapping like half the mid laners, right? And he could. A lot of the time, Nemesis wants to say, "I never had the opportunity," but somebody who is as good as Nemesis should have created his own opportunity, and so therefore I'm less sympathetic to him. But if we're talking about waste of talents, he is a waste of talent.
I've got one that we haven't talked about. If it's totally logical in light of this episode, logically, the reason why this person is the biggest wasted talent ever from the West is if instead of being born in Denmark, his parents had been Christian, like missionaries to Korea, and Caps had been born in Seoul, then logically, by Peter's logic, he would be the greatest player ever.
Well,
I mean, if infallible logic.
If he was born in Seoul, he's born in Korea.
It's interesting here that I don't know who you're talking about because I'm going to say if you're talking about Froggen, like the one thing I'd say about Froggen is Froggen was offered LPL offers. Froggen had when League was exploding. In China, he had multiple LPL offers on the table, and he went to what team was he? Did he go to? He took less money to go to.
No. By the way,
you know, actually on my short
listen, I'll totally admit this, boys. Much like Rookie, I also have some crazy toxic relationship with people who have really bad career decisions. They're awesome at laning, I'll notice, but they can't bloody pick what team to go to. I was actually doing a joke about Caps there, Peter, because by origin, if he spoke Korean, then he'd be the shit, wouldn't he? Then he'd be unstoppable, bro. That's why he's the biggest.
To be honest, actually, the misunderstanding makes it more.
It made it funny.
Really, it's actually a better bit.
But I mean, like the Froggen thing. I don't think that there is a Western player who has made like a worse career decision in terms of what it could have done for them.
Yes,
because imagine you are like if you are the only Westerner playing in the LPL imagine what that could have done for your branding. Imagine your streaming career afterwards.
Yep.
Imagine what you could have done. You didn't even have to be the best in the league. You would have been like a top 5 mid laner in the league without any problem.
I'll even give you another reason, Peter. Here's also why it's actually insane, right? The reason we all on paper wouldn't do the move is because it's a crazy move. You don't speak Chinese. Bro, it would have actually helped your career, Froggen, if your excuse would be, well, I can't speak Chinese, so I'm just going to lane mid. They would have worked, but they've already done that with all the ADCs. They would let you play that. The worst thing is there's a mid-table LPL team would pay you a king's ransom and let you just fucking hit CS, mate, and then the jungler would come whenever. Like, low-key, that's actually your dream. I'd said the same thing about Forg1ven when he got the offer, Peter. I actually said, I think for you it might be an upside. You wouldn't be able to communicate with your team. Then you just have to fucking click the button, wouldn't you? Like, isn't that positive for you?
So I don't know if it's public exactly, but let me put it this way: there was a top 4 LPL team and like a top 7 to 8 team, right? That were making the offer. I think the 7 to 8 team was like insane money, and the top 4 was like decent money, right?
Yes,
but yeah,
okay.
That's I don't think I'm losing anything if I go and say that, right? So so he literally. Yeah. Okay. So that's Froggen. And on the Caps thing, it's funny, but I think, but the Caps thing, it's funny, but Caps could have been really good in the LPL as well, but I don't think Caps would ever have gone to the LPL.
Okay, I've got one last person to chuck in here, which is actually, I think that the way that Cloud9 handled Sneaky towards the end was bullshit. I think that Sneaky had a lot more to give. So that was someone who I think actually proved himself really good for a while. And you
think he got typecast?
Yeah, I think that he ended up being the butt of he ended up having to pick up the slack. He had to end up being the one picking up the bill. Yeah. Remember that time when Niski didn't want to play a Cassiopeia game, so Sneaky had to first time at bot lane just so Niski could have a better matchup. That happened a lot. Whereas actually Sneaky, when he had resources in the early years, was a stud. This guy was great. I think he's one of those players which, I mean, if we're going to talk about Odoamne and the same kind of level of that, but Sneaky had proved himself before. Yeah. We've also talked mainly about European people as well. True. I think in terms of NA, I think that Sneaky had a lot more to give. It really annoys me what happened to his career at the end. I think they should have just given him a chance to actually just rip and not just let him play supportive for the team.
By the way, you can also say as well that actually we didn't put a lot of North Americans. There are actually a lot of North Americans could be on this list though, for the very simple reason that the downside of their region was too much money. I can tell you, people might think I'm memeing when I say this. I'm being serious. I know this guy had an excellent career, but actually someone like Meteos, bro, if this was old esports where you don't get paid millions of dollars, he'd probably still be playing now. It was an excellent player. He could have kept playing for many more years, but he'd already made jillion dollars and he wasn't on the best team anymore. So he could just say, right, I quit the game, right? I'm just going to be a core streamer or whatever. That's kind of tragic in its own way.
And the other big one, of course, is Dardoch, right? Dardoch,
he's right in that self-made category,
if Dardoch was in the modern day, he wouldn't have stayed in NA.
By the way, he's the obvious person, like Giorgio Busio. Should have come to Europe. He would have had a fucking brilliant time in Europe, wouldn't he?
Yeah, but I mean, this is a tragedy because a lot of our what ifs we got to see in the East, right? Because people like Kanavi, Insect, people who TheShy, right? People who were kind of turned away by the LCK system because they didn't fit into the mold.
Even Tarzan, right? He ended up in LPL for a long time.
Yeah, they got to go to LPL because there's expectations on how you behave in LCK Academy, and if you don't do it, you get exiled. But you always had the option to go to LPL. But because of the way that the NA money happened, we always talk about, we missed all these chances to see all these great talents like Bjergsen developing. And sure, but we got other people that came up like Humanoid, like Nemesis, like Larson. But the NA players, we never got to see the other versions. Dardoch. And, I think Dardoch would have been fine in EU. The flame that you saw on Breaking Point, it's just nothing for an EU team.
I know. By the way, the idea of saying bye Piggy is the crazy. That's not even top 5 things I've seen people say in solo queue. What are we even talking about? That's a Tuesday in Europe. What are you talking about? I think I've told this story before. It was once said one time. Put it this way: in H2K, the kind of arguments they were having, guys, wasn't you died at the end of the game and didn't try. They were having arguments Forg1ven just said to Jankos, you're just Polish and you just drink vodka all the time. What? They were doing shit like that, bro. They were going personal and stuff. Yeah, exactly. Wild shit. So no, that was some fucking crazy work.
A couple of comments later, someone's grabbing the chair.
Exactly. That's the sort of stakes we're talking about. Exactly. They're not in NA. They were and then he was raising his voice in a VOD review. What even is that? That's nothing. That's nothing. Again, I'd like to introduce you to people like Mithy and stuff when they were players, bro. They were fucking going ham. I'm telling you.
God. Well, we've gone down from 5 topics to 3 to 2, but they've been meaty ones. Okay, next time I get a topic, I'll make sure it's not actually world encompassing.
And as usual, even though for this one, these were topics we did, we will obviously take fan topics. So if you subscribe to the Last Free Nation Discord, there is a channel, Shut Up and Scale. You can put your topic in there. Maybe it will be featured on a next episode of Shut Up and Scale.
My bad this time.
It was worth it.